I show 2 minutes. I'm ready to go, I think. I'm ready. I'm good. I show 9:30.
Great, thank you very much. Let's call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Western Municipal Water District. Tammy, would you please conduct a roll call?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Director Torres.
Here.
Director Denstedt.
Good morning, I am present.
Good morning. Director Roten.
I am here, good morning.
Good morning. Director Risby.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. President Gardner.
I am here as well.
Thank you, President Gardner. You do have a quorum today.
Great, thank you very much. This morning, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Jonte Turner, wherever you are. There. Come on up, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, how long you've been here and what you do. And
Yes, I've been at Western for 4 years. I'll be my 5th year in October 19th.
Great.
I ran track and field at UC Berkeley. Go Bears.
I know that stadium.
You said USC?
No,
He knows the stadium.
at Berkeley.
Oh, yeah, it's
stadium.
a great stadium. Yeah, and I just like to spend my free time relaxing. And
Jonte, share your high school affiliation.
my high school affiliation.
Where'd you go to high school?
Indio?
Okay.
Yeah.
And a local kid
Indio
now.
to Berkeley, that's a big step. Good
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Small town. A little bit of a culture shock because Northern California and Southern California is not the same.
The weather's a little different, too.
Yeah, 2 different places for sure. But yeah, California kid. That's about
Great.
it. Oh, source control program specialist 1. I was a wastewater operator previously. That's why I started. Thank you guys for giving me that opportunity, and then just kept working my way up and still continue working.
Great, we're glad to have you here.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jonte.
Thank you, Jonte.
I would like to just give a little bit more about Jonte. So Jonte is a real success story in how we would like to continue to operate in developing staff, our exceptional staff. So we brought Jonte in with kind of no skills other than a really smart mind and a willingness to work hard. And he's taken advantage of that and grew through being a wastewater operator, and then he had an aspiration to be in regulatory compliance, and there was an opportunity. He seized that opportunity, interviewed, and won that job. So he's a good example of what we'd really like to do with staff here at Western. Thank you, Jonte.
Thank you. Okay, Tammy, do we have any public comment?
We have no general public comments at this time, and I've received no written comments.
Okay, and there is no one online indicating they'd like
There's
to speak.
currently no one online.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to the consent calendar. Consists of minutes of the May 15th meeting, receive and file the 2024 cash disbursement report for March, or the March 2024, and to approve a new contract with Chandler Asset Management for managing our investment funds. Anybody wish to pull any of those?
Move to approve. Second?
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? If not, Tammy, if you would do a roll call vote, please.
Director Torres,
Yes.
Director Denstedt,
Aye.
Director Roten,
Yes.
Director Risby,
Aye.
President Gardner.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Miller, have we anything to add to the agenda?
There's nothing to add to the agenda today.
That may be a good thing.
It's a good, usually a good thing.
Our action items, we'll start with a fun one. It is to consider adopting Resolution 3310, approving the general manager's operating budget for fiscal years 2024-25 and 2025-26, and approve the job classification plan and salary grades table, and approve the capital improvement and facilities plan for the years 2024-25 and 25-26. Mr. Miller?
All right. Thank you very much. We've got not a super long presentation. We've had three very, I think, very good workshops to talk about the budget. We've kind of torn through the numbers with the board in the workshops, so I don't, unless there's questions by the board, I don't want to go back through all the detailed numbers. So this will be more of a summary of the three workshops. Daisy and Kevin are going to do the majority of the presentation, but it is my budget that I'm proposing to the board, so I want to make sure that I own the budget and that you're comfortable with the budget. So let's go to the next slide. So, you know, we've talked a lot about this. I've talked a lot about this with the board in the workshops. We haven't had the public participating. There have been public meetings, but we haven't had a lot of public participation. So some of this is going to be reiterating what we've talked about so that it is transparent in front of our public and our customers. So obviously the budget has to do with inflationary pressures. We've all seen that, you know, whether it's gas, electricity, met rates. We have all sorts of increasing inflationary pressures, including the cost for our outstanding staff. So all that has to be incorporated into the budget. We have been kind of growing our business a little bit, and we've been doing that with kind of holding our staff at a solid, stable level. And this year, as you've heard me in the workshops, we have to start elevating our staff levels so that we can support all these things that we're doing. We've incorporated a lot of new projects, a lot of capital projects, a lot of assets, a lot of operational constraints, and some new business initiatives on statewide initiatives and Met initiatives where we're just stretching our staff a little too thin to take on all these things. So as you know, and you've seen in our presentations, we need to right-size the staff to match the valuable business initiatives that we've taken on. Obviously, our financial strength is number one in the budget. We have to make sure that we can afford what we're proposing to the board, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but our financial strength is still outstanding. And then, you know, there's always this balance that has to occur between maintaining our existing assets, which is very expensive, and it's an industry-wide challenge to how much asset management, replacement, refurbishment are you going to do, with how are we building our infrastructure for the growth of the region? Because Riverside County is the fastest growing county in the state, one of the fastest in the nation. And so how are we expanding our assets, not just maintaining them, but expanding them to meet our future needs? So that's a real balancing act. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then obviously, what are the rate impacts going to be from this budget? So the first is a 2-year budget. The first year budget is already, there won't be any rate adjustments. That's part of our 4-year rate program that we adopted 3 years ago. But the second year of the budget, we will be coming back with a proposal for the board next year on modified rates. So that's just the kind of the revenue side of it. You know, budget is all about the expenditure side, but we've presented you in the workshops what those current revenue requirements are and what the future revenue requirements are going to be. Next slide. So, you know, I guess it's pretty simple. All you got to do is vote yes on the budget. But we've got a lot to present to you. But the operating budget will be funded by our existing adopted rates and reserves in the first year. And as I said, we'll have to be coming back for modifications in the second year. You'll be approving the capital improvement plan. Within the capital improvement plan are all those asset maintenance refurbishment projects. And then very, very important, obviously, is that we need to maintain our financial health, and this will allow us to maintain our outstanding credit ratings, AAA and AA+. Next slide. So with that, I'll bring the star of the show up, Daisy, who's been working with her team and has done the real heavy lifting on the budget, and she'll take over the next few slides. Daisy?
Thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So glad to be here before you to present the operating budget and the capital improvement facilities plan today. So Western Water adopts a 2-year operating budget as a management tool and as a basis for determining, like Craig mentioned, the revenue requirement that we use in the formulation of our water and sewer rates. When we discuss the operating budget, we only focus on the operating funds, and we exclude all designated funds, such as capacity charge funds and asset replacement funds that are mainly used to pay for capital projects. And then for our capital improvement facilities plan, any project listed on your listing, which is included in your packet today, that exceeds $100,000 in total project cost, will be brought back to the board individually for your consideration. Okay, thank you. Is that better? Okay. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I would like to briefly walk you through the operating budget and CIFP process. So the process of developing our budget began back in September of last year with setting up a new budget software that we utilize for staff input. As part of the process this year, to configure the capital section of that software, the team worked collaboratively with our grants team to ensure that our project input form in the new budget system does provide our grants team additional information they need to assess our priority projects for potential grant awards in the future. This is in line with one of our strategic priorities of improving grant program process to support Western Water's prioritized projects. Then we work closely with the team from November through January, receiving expenses input, staff addition requests, as well as receiving capital project inputs initially through the end of January. In February and March, we had a multitude of meetings to review inputs, including many follow-up meetings to revise requests. We work closely with our CIFP committee to prioritize the extensive list of projects in a cross-departmental collaborative process over the 6 official CIFP committee meetings we had. Aside from those meetings, we had over 40 CIFP-related meetings since the beginning of this process, and over 100 meetings related to the operating budget that I have been involved in, and I'm sure there's many other meetings that happened by each of the team. In March and April, the team worked extensively to bring it all together. We reviewed reserves, like Craig mentioned, rate revenue impacts from the budget as we're working diligently finalizing the projects listing in the packet today. We were also assessing these projects for agency affordability, which Kevin will talk about in a few slides. On April 15th, like Craig mentioned, we presented a budget overview and background information to the committee. We had our first budget workshop April 22nd, where we presented the initial capital improvement facilities plan. The second budget workshop, where we focused on the major drivers in detail of the operating budget. Then on May 29th, at our third budget workshop, we brought it all together to present a complete picture of the budget in a summarized format that we will also go over today. Now Kevin will review some of those budget drivers.
Great, thank you. Actually, before I do that, let me commend Daisy. Daisy is our finance supervisor, and this year she not only was doing the operating budget, which she normally does, she also took on the compiling the capital budget, and because she didn't want to be bored, she decided to implement a budget software system. Prior to that, we lived with Excel only, and Daisy implemented a very sophisticated budget software system that I think will benefit us for years to come. So thank you for that, Daisy. So yes, budget drivers. Next slide, please. Clearly, there are dozens and dozens of inputs into the budget, but these are the primary drivers, both expenses and revenue drivers. As Craig mentioned, our adopted water and wastewater rates for year one of the budget, fiscal year 24-25, of course, being a driver. We have talked about in recent workshops that we'll be utilizing the pass-through provision this coming fiscal year for sewer in August and for water in January. And I'll talk a little bit more about the pass-through provision, but that'll affect our rates and therefore our revenue for this coming year, year one. Source water costs and supply, of course, a very big budget driver. The most notable source water cost increases are from the Metropolitan Water District. Their recently adopted rate increases include a 22% increase in the treated or potable water rate over the next 2 calendar years. Also in the budget, we reduced the amount of surplus potable water purchased from the city of Riverside by 60%, or about 1,400 acre-feet, less than the current budget, to reflect historical purchases rather than using optimal target amounts as we have in the past rate models. And we reduced the amount of groundwater pumped from wells in the Murrieta service area by 9%, or 137 acre-feet, again, to better reflect actuals. So all of these factors clearly have a very significant impact on our cost of water, and that will be reflected in future proposed customer rates when we come before the board with workshops a little less than a year from now. Projected water demand certainly is a very important driver. We use a sophisticated model to help determine that. We have put in a 1% customer growth. We utilize wastewater treatment arrangements and relationships with other entities to process sewage in our Murrieta service area, as well as our La Sierra service area. We utilize the Santa Rosa Regional Resources Authority, or SURA, and Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority, or RCRA. We just love acronyms, that's for sure. Property tax growth, very important revenue, and investment earnings gets put into the mix. We have salary growth and benefit growth from our existing employees. Craig, on the next slide, will be talking about the new positions that are incorporated into the budget. And then, as he's mentioned too, inflationary pressures have been felt. The National Consumer Price Index has increased by 18% from 2020 through 2023, and Western has certainly been affected by that. The most notable is a $1.7 million, or 36% increase in our purchase power from our current budget to year one's proposed budget. Very substantial. The materials and supplies budget up 32%, laboratory services budget up 40%, just to name a few there. Our strategic priorities, of course, influence our programs and projects. That is a budget driver. Asset replacement funding to replace our aging infrastructure. We set aside a little bit into that savings account every year for that purpose. We have debt service obligations on bonds and our state revolving fund loans that we need to pay. Of course, there's ever-changing regulatory requirements as well. So next, Craig will address the staff additions incorporated into the proposed operating budget. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kevin. So if you, I highlighted before that we've got to right-size the organization for all the work that we've been taking on. So this chart kind of shows you where we stand now. The first column is the current headcount in all these different departments. And then the ask of 12 new positions over the next 2 years in this budget are shown broken out by budget year. So 24-25, we're going to add engineering position, a human resources position, and you can see that it's really dominant by operations. We're running thin on operating staff, and so we'll be looking at 2 wastewater operators, a technical services hire, mechanical services to operate and fix all of our mechanical devices that we've been adding to the system, and then another person to help in our asset management program. So that'll be in the first year. And then in year 2, you can see that we are going to continue with 3 more operations staff. So construction and collections, another mechanical services person, and then we do need another analyst to help us evaluate the programs in operations and balance cost services and projects that we're working on. And we also need to backfill communications and customer service director position. So as I've promoted Sarah up to be an assistant general manager, we never backfilled that position. So there is a gap between her leadership team and what I'm now tasking her to do for the organization. And so in year 2, we need to fill that gap. So happy to answer any questions about those positions, but that's our 2-year plan on the staffing resources level. Next slide. In addition to the headcount, so I need to go to the board to add headcount. So you'll be approving that. You'll also be approving what we like to call internally as reclasses. That's within my authority. Where the board sees it is that on our spreadsheet that shows all the different positions in the organization, there'll be some changes as to the titles of those positions. And so in order to continue to align staff and leadership with the priorities of these organizations, I can make these changes. But the board will approve them as part of the matrix. So I just want to make sure you understand what you're approving. The financial impact is very minimal. It's not headcount, it's just changing titles and realigning some groups to meet our internal needs. So not the board's job to determine those, my job, but I just want to make sure to be fully transparent. Next slide.
All right. Well,
So let me turn it back over to Kevin.
Great, thanks, Greg. So as mentioned in the second budget workshop, year 1 of the biennial budget is based on either utilizing existing retail customer water and sewer rates or water and sewer rates that will be increasing this coming year due to passing through higher rates charged to Western Water by our third-party water providers and sewer treatment providers. These rates charged by third-party providers are higher than what was anticipated when customer rates were adopted by our board after a public hearing on June 2nd, 2021. This so-called pass-through provision is allowed by the California Government Code and was authorized by our board during the June 2021 board meeting. And we'll be talking more about that at our Finance Committee meeting this month. So over the next 6 to 8 months, staff will prepare a new cost of service study in order to develop proposed water and sewer rates that would be effective July 1, 2025. Now, since we don't have those rates based on year 2 of the proposed biennial budget, staff has determined, though, that existing rates are insufficient to pay for year 2 budgeted costs. Therefore, overall rate revenue would need to increase for each service area by the percentages listed on this slide and the next slide in order to cover the cost of providing water and sewer service. Again, the percentages on this slide represent the increase in the overall rate revenue for the particular service area. The cost of service study I mentioned, that's what will determine the proposed charges in the individual customer rates, such as the commodity charge rates, pumping charge rates, and so forth, in order to generate the overall rate revenue increases presented on this slide. As you can see on this slide, we're looking at about an 8% increase in the water service areas, which are very comparable percentages to what our neighboring agencies are looking at, such as Rancho California Water District, Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District, and Eastern Municipal Water District. Next slide, please. And then this slide shows the same type of information for our retail sewer service area, looking about 4.5% then to 7%.
Kevin, real quick question. This is to accommodate the increase from Met. Is that, or no?
For the, if you go back one slide,
Yeah.
this is in part. So part of MET's increases, which are effective January 1, 2025, which is year one of the budget, will accommodate that with utilizing the pass-through provision.
Okay.
Okay, but we still have year two of Metropolitan's rates. And so that's rolled into this 8.1%. And so year one was an 11% increase by Metropolitan for treated water. Year two is 10%. You may ask, why is it only 8? Well, that's because our cost didn't go up that high by far. So the weighted average brings it down to 8.1.
Since we're just at a pause, I was going to wait to the end. Is year two's, is year's two budget created with increases assumed?
Right, in order to balance the budget, and since we didn't know which revenue line it would drop into, we just took how much revenue we would get from existing rates, how much, we added, say, for example, 8.1% on top of those, just so that the budget would be balanced for year two. So yes, it does assume that there will be a rate increase, though, of course, not guaranteed until there's a public hearing, noticing requirements, majority protest provision is accommodated, and then the board takes a vote. Oh, well, I could tell a joke, but no. Well, let me turn it over to Daisy. She'll be presenting the overall budget summary.
Thank you, Kevin. So Kevin, did you want to go over? We did have some changes on this slide from the last time we saw this summary at the third budget workshop.
Oh, sure, be glad to. Since our workshop last week, I asked staff to recategorize 1.5 million in combined DeSalter Enterprise water purchased by our Riverside Potable Service Area. Okay, what does that mean? That means a change was made in how we will record this internal transfer between two operating funds. The impact on the net surplus line, which is the last line of that first top section, is zero, no impact. It's just a movement of money up and down the column. However, it did impact the last line on the slide, which is the total spending authority. That increased by 1.5 million because of this change in both years. And I believe, Director Gardner, you mentioned you'd like to be aware of any changes we made. So we made an internal adjustment. Net zero impact to the overall budget, but since it affected the expense side, the net spending authority did go up by less than 1%.
Thank you.
Certainly. Back to you, Daisy.
Thank you, Kevin. So this budget summary is one that presents the full picture, including both projected revenue and the expense line items in a summarized format organized by functional elements. The budget is divided into three main areas: operating funds, which represent operating revenues and expenses, such as water sales, water purchases, wastewater disposal, and results from the exchange transactions associated with the principal activities of Western. Other revenues and expenses not included in the above categories are presented as non-operating revenues and expenses. And then transfers represent allocations to or from funds for asset replacement and debt service funding. I would like to draw your attention to the bottom section, like Kevin mentioned, of this summary, which shows the total spending authority, which is made up of uses of operating funds, uses of non-operating funds, and transfers. For a proposed total spending authority for fiscal year 25 of 171.4 million and 183.5 million in the second year. These amounts are growing 2% from the current fiscal year 24 amended budget and 7% in the second year. The budget summary is a condensed version of the budget adoption resolution, which is part of the packet. And the budget resolution shows more details. It also provides the following authorities. It establishes the spending authority for each fiscal year and provides specific authority for the general manager regarding labor, budget carryovers, as well as demand-based exclusions from the spending authority. We also included up in the packet what we call the consolidated packets for each fiscal year, which do provide even more details on the budget. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you, Daisy. So let's transition into capital improvement program. We did a really deep dive at the workshop on capital improvement, so we'll just kind of highlight that now. There were lots of good questions and lots of good discussion by the board and our team. Tim has led the effort with operations and engineering and asset management to pull this together. This is, it's always an evolving plan. You know, we started really changing the way we did our capital improvement plan several years ago, where we've really worked hard to evaluate the cost benefit of every single project and rank them in comparison to one another, so that all that hard work pays off, because when we start putting together the top 10 projects, we're very comfortable that those are the most important projects to our customers and our ability to provide superior service. So let's go to the next slide. So obviously, there's a huge need to provide this investment. You know, the last thing we want to do is start having water outages. And, you know, we've seen that at other agencies in Southern California, and we don't want to be there. So there needs to be investment to maintain our assets and improve our assets, both on the water and the sewer side. And without those investments, we can't guarantee the reliability and the quality that we're guaranteeing our customers. So, you know, this is obviously very important to us and very important to the board, I know, obviously. And we have to minimize service disruptions. And I'm really happy with our track record of maintaining service. We have very few service interruptions, and hats off to Paul and Gary and Tony and Chris and his team, and also to Sarah and her team with the way that we now communicate outages and the way our staff attacks outages. We are just really fortunate to have very, very few outages and disruptions of service, and that's because of the investment that this board is making in our system and in our staff. So obviously this provides long-term benefits. We have to continue to keep our planning hats on and our investment hat. You know, this is all about the value of water and the value of the service that we provide. I think sometimes the public can have a short-term perspective and not want to invest in what we need to do to maintain our assets, but we don't have that short-term perspective up here. And so I just want to continue to remind the board about our need for this long-term investment and, you know, really show the value of those investments to the community. So let's go to the next slide, and Daisy's going to kind of run through the top 10 projects. You all asked a lot of questions about this, so feel free to ask more questions, but we just want to make sure we highlight it here in this final presentation. So Daisy?
Thank you, Craig. So the top 10 projects in year one listed on this table represent about 60% of the total capital expenditures planned in year one. I would like to note that grants and partner agency agreements make up 42% of the total expenditures in these top 10 projects for year one. Next slide, please. For year two, the top 10 projects in year two represent about 70% of the total capital expenditures planned in year two, and the grants and partner agency agreements offset the total project cost for these top 10 projects in year two by 42%. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the current CIFP, the biennial CIFP, and includes 3 years of additional estimates for capital expenditures. Here, I would also like to note that the offsets, which again include grants and partner agency agreements, offset year one capital expenditures total by 30% and 34% in year two. Now, Kevin will discuss the affordability of these capital expenditures.
Great, thank you, Daisy. So once the listing of capital projects has been rigorously evaluated as essential and prioritized by engineering, operations, and water resources staff.
Next slide, please.
Oh, there you go. Finance staff gets involved to determine how the projects will be paid for. Big question. There are two primary sources of funding. First, reserves, both existing reserves and future reserve revenue. And second, debt financing. If adequate reserve balances exist within a service area, these reserves are used to fund the capital projects that benefit that service area. If adequate reserve balances do not exist, then debt financing is used. The capital spending plan for the next 5 years assumes the use of $15 million from a new line of credit for the ongoing pipeline replacement program in years 3 through 5, plus $26 million in new debt to finance other capital projects in service areas with insufficient reserve balances. Both of these new debt issuances are planned to occur in 2026, but they are not expected to negatively impact our current high credit ratings. So once the project funding sources are determined, staff looks at the resulting number of days cash on hand. Now that's an important financial health indicator used by our credit rating agencies and support our AAA rating with Fitch. The number of days cash on hand, what is that? That would be if all of a sudden something terrible were to happen and absolutely no revenue came in. How long could we continue to purchase water, pay payroll, pay all of our operating expenses, rent, lights, et cetera, energy, debt service? When would we run out of cash if absolutely no revenue came in? And that's what that figure is. It looks at our unrestricted cash and investments. How long would it last us in paying all of our obligations? Our target for the number of days is about 1 year, or between 350 and 400 days. Then we look to see if the total reserve balances for all funds is materially drawn down or not over the 5-year planning period. And as you can see from this slide, the days cash on hand fits within our target range, and our reserves are not materially drawn down over the next 5 years. And it's for these reasons staff has concluded that the capital spending plan is affordable. Next, Daisy will present cost management efforts that were incorporated into the budget. Next slide.
Thank you, Kevin. So here I want to highlight some of our cost management efforts. We work hard to reduce pricing by continuing to seek regional, national, negotiated contracts and multi-year agreements that provides controlled costs and reduced pricings. We also brought previously outsourced maintenance and part manufacturing in-house, which reduced system maintenance costs and helps keep mission-critical spare parts on hand, reducing downtime and ensures our customer service needs are met. The in-house machine shop has improved our ability to build parts that are obsolete or have long lead times. Although the shop production capability is just getting started, we expect these associated potential savings to continue towards the future. Western utilizes a state-negotiated fuel purchase agreement to purchase fuel in bulk and stores on-site at operations. Bulk fuel storage provides cost savings and efficiency by utilizing a part-time employee to fill trucks in early morning hours, saving staff time and ensuring vehicles are fueled and ready each morning. In addition to cost savings, having bulk fuel storage contributes to Western's emergency preparedness, ensuring available fuel not only for fleet vehicles, but also for emergency generators as well. Ops has also implemented measures at major pumping sites, implemented stored energy system at Mockingbird Station, considered additional batteries at 3 locations, has completed a comprehensive evaluation of major pump stations, distribution systems, and solar array facilities, including multiple optimization projects that are now in place. This improves operations efficiency through newly installed controlled room at operations, and there's multiple building and facility lighting upgrades to improve efficiency as well. The implementation of our reservoir management system reduces water loss by maintaining and improving water quality, and it reduces labor costs by not having to manually flush water to improve water quality within a reservoir. It also results in reduced energy usage by being able to maintain higher water levels within a reservoir. We would refill the reservoir only during off-peak electrical times, which can save considerable dollars over time. As mentioned in the CIFP slide, the CIFP is estimated to be funded in the first year by a large share of grant opportunities. And as you know, the grants team works continuously to assess the priority projects listing for additional grant opportunities in the future.
All right, so let me try and wrap this up here so we can get this before the board for questions. But just to kind of summarize the goals that I wanted to achieve is obviously we need to maintain our strong financial what you're spending. It's, what are you investing in and how are you preparing for the future? And they ask great questions about how is Western positioning themselves for the future. And we want to be very, very comfortable with our responses to that. So really important to me. Stable and predictable rates. I've heard that from the board. I've heard that from other agencies. We want to make sure we're predictable for our customers. Our customers have to have their own personal budgets, and they have to be able to afford the services that we provide. We want to be predictable. And that's all part of, how we try to drive down our costs so that we can predict future rates. Obviously, credit rating saves us an enormous amount of money in borrowing, and so that is returned to the customers in lower future water rates. Grants, I know the board is very proud of our grants team. We've been amazingly successful on grants. You saw that on those charts with the capital projects that Daisy presented, the 2 years of projects, and the enormous percentage of grants that are paying for those projects. We love that, obviously, and we hope to continue that. But we've been extremely successful, and we'll continue to push really hard. And as long as money's out there, we're going to go after it. It's hard to keep up the success rate that we've had, but we will try. We will try. Capital improvement program, I've talked a lot about. Very, very important that we don't fall behind on the investments necessary to serve our area. And then, the last one is super important to me, and that's our workforce. We're not good without our workforce. We have a phenomenal workforce here, and so it takes a dedicated effort to do that. And that is retention, it's attraction of new staff, it's motivating that staff, it's giving them goals to strive to here at the agency so that we can maintain those top performers, and also motivating those top performers to always be top performers and not settling for status quo. We do great things here because of the people that go out and figure out that, wait a minute, if we reoperate our system, we can save our customers a lot of money. Our wastewater team has been phenomenal. I went to lunch, they organized, breakfast. We had breakfast a couple weeks ago, and the head of our wastewater team, Brian No, looked at one of his staff and said, now we've been modifying the way we operate the plant here, and how much money have we saved? And the operator said, it's about $1,000 a day. It's $365,000 a year. They weren't even going to tell me about it. And that's just the ethic and the staff. So, focusing on the dedicated and skilled workforce is really important to me, and hopefully it's really important to the board. So those are my budget goals. Let's go to the next slide. Obviously, before the board today is the consideration and hopefully the adoption of Resolution 3310, approving the budget. Also the approval of our job classification plan and salary grades table in accordance with Resolution 2902, and then also the approval of the capital improvement plan. So with that, we're done. What's the next slide say? Questions? Thank you. This is thank you. I guess it's assuming you'll approve it.
Yeah,
We're
you're
happy to address questions. I know the board does have some questions.
Let me open this up to the board, but before we do that, Tammy, is there any public comment on this item?
There is none.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll open it up to the board then.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm always have a lot of questions. I always try to lead in, and then you guys always answer my questions, and I just need to let the presentation just roll out. So that's always a great feeling. But, I really wanted to highlight, and I've harped on you for years, Craig, over being able to ring your own bell over the success and showing 42% worth of offsets in grant money coming in is truly a testament to the elite workforce that we have here that's working on those things, to our operators that spend a tremendous amount of time cutting costs out in the field and saving a lot of stuff that internally they know can happen, and they make it happen. You guys working with what UCR on the energy costs and figuring out small tweaks and turns on dials that save a tremendous amount of money. $1,000 a day, man, raise your hand if you don't want to save $1,000 a day, because I want to have a conversation with you where your funding is coming from. That's a tremendous asset, and it is definitely speaks to what an elite workforce you have built and created in this organization. I am certainly pleased to be a part of it. We went through extensive workshops. I missed one of them. However, I had a follow-up workshop with Craig and the team to get caught up to speed because I was up at Metropolitan doing my due diligence up there. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to answer all of my questions, to thoroughly vet everything that was going through. You guys spent a tremendous amount of time on this. And it is certainly, Mr. President, at the appropriate time, I would be happy to move this item for approval on the resolution of 3310 approving the general manager's operating budgets for the fiscal years 2024-2025, 25 through 26, approval of the job classification plan and salary grades table, and approval of the capital improvement and facility plans for fiscal years 24, 25, 25, and 26. And that would be my motion, sir, if you so choose to accept that at this time.
I think this is an appropriate time for a motion, so we will take that as a motion made. Other comments, questions? Second at any time, as soon as anybody's ready. Would anybody like to second the motion?
I will.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I just, I have a question. First of all, I want to start with thanking staff. I mean, every year you go above and beyond. This year, in particular, I want to say that everything's been very clear, very well done, very well sourced. I want to acknowledge the cost management efforts because they're a huge deal. It's a huge deal. I think, obviously the slides aren't up and my memory is not the best, but a lot of the grants, a lot of the work, bringing things in-house, all of that is a huge deal, and helping us save money to make it easy. And truly, this is not something, this came to me as Kevin was speaking, and so I'm going to voice this concern. And I would actually like it to be reflected in the minutes. So, in my house, I'm going to make this as simple as possible for the public listening, right? In my house, when I budget for the year, the month, whatever, let's say I budget for the year, I budget based on how much money I make, right? If I'm expecting to get a salary raise, then I can budget for that expectation in my MOU or whatever. But if I'm not sure that I'm getting a rate or a salary increase in a year, in the following year, I don't budget for that increase. And that's how I work, and how my mommy and daddy taught me how to budget, right? So my concern is fiscal year 2. With assuming a rate increase. I, myself, I'm not sure about my colleagues, don't know how I plan or how I'm going to vote until I see these proposed rates. So I'm very concerned about voting for a year 2 budget with that assumed in it. That I want this noted in the minutes, but again, going back to my first comments, I think this is incredibly well done. It's very well sourced. I know that, and by the time we get there, the cost management efforts are going to be better. I am concerned about, for myself and my constituents, voting on a year 2 on something that we still don't know how it will turn out vote-wise, and I know there's still a lot of work to get to even that Prop 218 process. So I am concerned for that reason. I try to work out a couple of different ways to do this. I don't want to make things complicated because I know of all the work that you've put in to this budget, and what your ask is right now. But that's just my concern, and I needed to voice it. And again, I hope that it's reflected in the minutes.
Other questions or comments? Did you have a?
Yes, so listening to Gracie, it kind of came about to me that this is not reflective of how are we going to vote 8 months later, of how the rates are going to be presented to us, what it is. We're not making a commitment, but what we are doing today is seeing where we are and how, as Craig has presented, this budget of what our needs are and how is our agency is going to move forward for the next 2 years. That's how I've seen it, but I understand your concern, and I don't think that's a commitment for anyone of how anyone is voting 8 months from now or 1 year from now.
I think I have this right, so correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, but our adopted rate program ends next year, at the end of next year. And we have a pass-through provision in that, so our increased costs from MET and other things, we can adjust those rates mid-course without going back through a whole new Prop 218 process. We can't do that for the second year of this budget because we haven't adopted that rate structure yet. And we will consider those things. What's being presented to us in the budget is the amount of money that staff thinks we will need to develop from additional revenue, whether that ends up being a rate increase or Dr. Money finds more grants, or it could be all kinds of things that will contribute toward that revenue requirement. And at this point, we're not making a decision on how that revenue requirement will be met, and the revenue requirement may change over time as well. We're guessing what things are going to cost. So I think it is important that we understand that, and in staff's defense, it has been clear to me from the first workshop that we were looking at a budget, particularly for the second year, that requires additional revenue which is not yet approved. And the budget assumes that that money will come from somewhere. If the money doesn't come from somewhere, we'll have to revisit the budget and not do something.
Thank you, President Gardner. I just want to make sure that that's correct. If we don't get an 8% increase in the March Air Force Base area, our plan would be to find 8% somewhere else. Is that correct? Or I'm just making sure. My vote is matters to me. So I want to. Yeah, it matters to a lot. A lot of people, 100-something thousand voters. But I just want to make sure that that's correct. So what we're looking at is, in order to cover this budget, we're going to need whatever it was, 8, 5, 7, throughout the service areas. We're going to look, if for some reason that is not through rate increases, we're going to look for those percentages elsewhere.
So, Director Gardner, you're correct. You explained that well. We have rate authority for this year coming up. Within that authority is the pass-through provision. So Metropolitan, for example, Metropolitan's increases will be handled with the pass-through provision the first year of the budget. Metropolitan has already approved the second year rate increases, which are going to be 10%. So we don't have pass-through authority for the second year yet So that's what we'll come back and we will incorporate Metropolitan's increases, and not just Metropolitan's increases. This isn't driven by just Metropolitan. These are energy, gas, all the other cost inflations that we see. So that you can kind of think of it like we reset our rates next year. And so that'll be presented to this board of how we're going to meet that. We don't know, as Director Torres is saying, we don't actually know all the components yet. I'm very confident that we will know them shortly. We have a good idea of what they're going to be. Kevin uses a lot of experience, and so our projection, I think, is really, really good. Kevin's signaling me he wants to add to what I'm going to say.
There, just some technicalities too. So the pass-through provision is actually legal for 5 years, so it would go into the second year budget. We don't normally think about that, but we do have pass-through provision authority for that second year. Number two, do know though that our rates don't expire on June 30th, 2025. Just the existing rates would just continue on, so nothing expires. Also note too that the budget is not legally required by any entity. So we use our budget as purely as a planning tool, but is not legally required, whereas it is with some other government types, but not for Western. And as a planning tool, we're really adopting not so much, we're really not technically adopting the revenue, we're adopting the spending authority for the general manager. So that's the bottom line, is the spending authority. That's what we're asking for. We will know through budget workshops on the rates next spring how things are looking, and as we start tweaking all the dials and getting all the latest information, building a brand new rate model and so forth, we'll know a lot more before year 2 starts. Before Craig exercises spending authority in year 2, we'll know how those rates are appearing and we'll adjust as needed.
Wow, Kev, I should just, ask Kevin direct.
Craig told me to say that earlier,
No,
so
no,
it's
no,
really
no.
not me.
No, thank you. That was a great way you addressed my concerns perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, Ed. Yeah, please.
Actually, probably 2 comments if I remember what the second one was. So, Kevin, you stole my thunder because in my head I was going, the budget is a planning document. The budget is a planning document. And, I've heard that in the past, whether it was here or somewhere else. And it's a really good tool for a planning document. I also think we've talked about the benefits of having a 2-year budget plan versus doing this every year, because an incredible amount of work behind the scenes goes into this. And I know that ratepayers may not necessarily realize that. And Daisy, you mentioned like how many meetings you've had and how many meetings other departments have had. Those actually took place. And when we attend the budget workshops and we hear about that, it, for me, instills my confidence in the process, but also in the end result, which is this spending plan for the next 2 years. And knowing that absolutely, we are not saying in year 2 that our rates are going to go up this amount of money because this is what the spending plan says today. We'll see that when we get there. And 2, I think it just happened to fall that since we do a 2-year budget, that it just fell when we had like 1 year and not 1 year. You know what I mean? And so then the next time the rates will have already been taken care of, and we'll have a more accurate and approved and Prop 218 process to ensure that budget plan. So those were the 2 things I wanted to say. Was 1, the planning document. Thank you for sharing that, Kevin. And then 2 was the incredible amount of staff time and diligence and and Daisy, even hearing all through that, you're incorporating a new software, to do all this in amongst what you're already, you're building the plane as you are going to need to fly it. And that's pretty amazing. So huge thank you to staff. I know for me as a director, it gives me a lot of confidence in knowing that this has been so vetted and so looked at by so many very qualified and passionate people, and then our board as well through our workshops and discussions. So I just want to say thank you, and I was happy to second the motion.
Okay, just one last comment for staff. Craig, from you down to each of our, sub-organizations, this has been, I think, the best thought out, best analyzed, best presented budget that I have ever seen. I've worked on a lot of budgets in the public and the private sector over the years. A whole lot smaller than this one, some bigger than this one. But congratulations to everybody. You just did a really good job. And even for non-financial people, it's understandable. And that's not easy to do in a budget.
I
So,
second that comment.
thank you. And with that, Tammy, when the system is ready, if you would do a roll call vote.
Director Torres?
Yes, but please note for the record that this vote does not impact or indicate how the rate adjustments will go on my vote.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Aye.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much. We have another resolution. This is to consider adopting Resolution 3320, approving the Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority fiscal year 24-25 budget.
All right, thank you, President Gardner. Veronica Zhang is going to present this item for us. Veronica?
Thank you, Craig. Good morning, President Gardner and members of the board. So Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority, we call it RECRA as abbreviation, is a 5-member agency, including Western Water as one of the member. And this agency, this authority provides wastewater treatment services for our La Sierra area wastewater customer. So with that, annually we do a budget adoption for this authority. And Western Water is actually the administrator for this agency. So it does the budget, accounting, and reporting for this agency as well. So for fiscal year 24-25, the budget increased about 1.8 million from 22.2 to 24.1, and mainly due to, on the operating side, is due to a additional full-time position requested, along with normal labor costs, utility cost increases, especially in the electricity area, as well as purchase of a centrifuge rotation assembly, along with parts. So what worth mentioning is the earlier Craig mentioned about the cost-saving measures that operations have on the chemicals, which helped request budget to retain within a 6.5 increase for the operating side. Because of that decrease on chemical costs, we were able to retain the rate increases on the request side as well. In addition to that, the capital budget of the RECRA increased about 1.1 million, which is 19.1% overall. So that's mainly due to about $500,000 new PAYGO projects and about $600,000 enhancement relating to calculation of asset replacement costs. So this is the overall budget for RECRA. As far as the impact to Western Water, the budget is about $2.5 million in total. It's about a $275,000 increase from prior year. And all these budget figures has already been incorporated into the previous action item, the proposed operating budget of Western Water. So with this, Finance Committee and staff recommend the board adopt this resolution 3320 for approving Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority's 24-25 budget.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Certainly open to questions. Director Rizvi may
I-
want to make some
I-
comments
I-
because the RCRA board approves the budget first,
Right.
and then it goes to all the member agencies. So Director Rizvi, if you'd like to make any comments.
Just before we do that, let me verify whether we have any public comment on this item.
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Director Rizvi.
I would just ask my colleagues to approve this budget as it was approved at RCRA.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the, approving the Western Riverside uh, County Regional Wastewater Authority fiscal year 2024-25 budget.
Second.
Great. Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? Not, Tammy, when the system is ready.
Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Aye.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Our next item of business is yet another resolution. This one is Resolution 3313, setting water rates and charges for wholesale agencies.
Yeah, thank you, President Gardner. We've been working on this with our wholesale agencies for a while. We've answered all the questions. This is passing through the charges from Metropolitan, and it's also approving our additional charge for all the maintenance that we have to do on our facilities to deliver that water. So I'll allow Kevin to present.
Great, thank you, Greg. The purpose of this resolution is to establish rates for the new fiscal year and next calendar year. And these water rates and charges are incorporated already into Western Water's biennial budget that we adopted just a little bit ago. On April 9th, 2024, the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Water District set water rates for calendar years 2025 and 2026. These rates and charges, as well as Western Water's own established rates and charges, are in Resolution 3318 and were communicated to our wholesale agencies on April 30th. There are 5 topics addressed in this resolution. Western Water's own administrative charge and Mills Gravity Line maintenance charge for the upcoming fiscal year, which are each proposed to go up by 3%. The administrative charge is assessed on each acre-foot of water delivered to wholesale agencies, and the purpose of this charge is to offset a portion of Western Water's general district expenses directly related to wholesale water agency activities. The Mills Gravity Line maintenance charge is assessed on each acre-foot of water delivered through the gravity line, and the purpose of this charge is to offset day-to-day maintenance costs related to this very important transmission pipeline. Examples of maintenance activities include water quality testing, turnout maintenance, meter calibrations, minor repairs, cathodic protection, and easement maintenance. Second topic addressed in the letter and the resolution, wholesale agency rates and charges for Metropolitan Water for calendar year 25. As Craig mentioned, they're essentially a pass-through of Metropolitan's rates plus the administrative charge, and if applicable, the Mills Gravity Line maintenance charge just mentioned. Metropolitan's treated water rate is going up 11% to $1,395 per acre foot, and the untreated rate is going up 1% to 912 acre feet. Again, that's for calendar year 25. The net Metropolitan Readiness to Serve charge for the upcoming fiscal year to Western Water is increasing overall by 17%. Attachment 1 reflects each wholesale agency's share of this charge, as well as the share to our own retail water customers. Metropolitan's capacity charge for the upcoming calendar year to Western Water is also increasing by about 17%. That information is reflected in Attachment 2 as far as the allocation to our wholesale agencies and our own retail water customers. And then lastly, we have the Mills Gravity Line Major Maintenance and Repair Reserve charge. The total amount to be funded for the coming fiscal year is the 10-year budget of $9.6 million divided by 10, or $961,259. This amount remains unchanged from the current year, and Attachment 3 reflects the allocation of that amount to each of the service right holders, which includes other water agencies and Western Water's retail customers. That concludes my summary. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Are there questions from the board? I see that we do have some of our wholesale agency personnel in the audience. Did any of you wish to say anything on this one? Anybody online, Tammy?
We have no requests to speak.
Okay, thank you. Then I would look for a motion.
Motion to adopt Resolution 3318, setting the water rates and charges for wholesale agencies.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? If not, Tammy, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Aye.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much. And then our last resolution is 3319, setting the combined desalter enterprise program water rate for fiscal year 2024-2025.
All right, thank you. Allison Clark is here to do the presentation. Maybe let me just give the board a minute of background. Remember, This is our pilot program of selling our combined desalter water to our customers. And so as part of that pilot program, we have to come back and set a rate that we're going to sell that at each year. Ryan and his team have done an outstanding job creating the market and getting all the customers to sign agreements. So they've all signed on to this pilot program, and it requires us to annually set a price for that water. So Allison's the one who's been crunching the numbers and coming up with the price. So Allison, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, directors. Before you this morning is Resolution 3319, setting the fiscal year 2025 rate for the Combined Desalter Enterprise Program, formerly known as the Wholesale Enterprise. We've renamed the program to better align with the goals of the enterprise and to distinguish it from our other wholesale services. The Combined Desalter Program combines water from both the Chino and Arlington desalters, and it serves it to participating customers. Customers include Harupa Community Services District and the cities of Norco and Corona. We also use the Sterling Pump Station and La Sierra Pipeline to deliver combined desalter water to Western retail customers, mainly in the Lake Hills and Victoria Grove service areas. The Combined Desalter Enterprise Program was launched in 2023 as a 2.5-year pilot program, and we're entering our final year of the current pilot. Per the program's water purchase agreement, we must establish a rate for the combined desalter water by June of each year. The established rate will cover capital, operation and maintenance, debt service, asset replacement, and general administrative costs for delivering 10,070 acre-feet of water. Based on projected expenses for fiscal year 25, staff is seeking a rate of $1,211 per acre-foot. This is a 5.1% increase over last year's rate of $1,152. This rate increase is driven primarily by the rising cost of labor and asset replacement needs at the Arlington desalter. This rate applies to downhill deliveries for wholesale customers who are at an elevation similar to the Arlington desalter. Deliveries made uphill via the Sterling Pump Station and La Sierra Pipeline pay a higher rate that matches the Metropolitan Water District Tier 1 rate in effect at time of delivery. The higher rate for uphill deliveries helps offset the added energy costs of pumping the water up the hill to the higher elevation. In early April, we provided our combined desalter customers with a preliminary rate for budget planning purposes. And last week, we followed up with them, letting them know that the final rate would be coming to the board for consideration at this meeting. These figures, these budget estimates were already included in our fiscal year 25 budget, and the Finance Committee and staff recommend the board approve this resolution. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Tammy, no public comment?
No public comment.
Okay. Any questions? And if not, is there a motion?
I'll move to adopt Resolution 3319, setting the Combined Desalter Enterprise Program water rates for fiscal year 24-25.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Motion and second. Any discussion? If not, Tammy, a roll call vote, please.
Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi? President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Great. Thank you very much. Now that we have all the numbers behind us, we get to the part that everybody really wants to see and hear. We are going to receive a report from the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We are honored to have with us Met Chair Adan Ortega and Met General Manager Adel Haj Khalil. Chair Ortega, welcome.
Thank you, President Gardner, Vice President Ruffton, and members of the board, General Manager Miller, and Western staff. It's a great pleasure being here with you today. Thank you to the members of the community and your purveyors that are also here. I want to thank your representative on MWD's board, Brenda Denstadt. Agree or disagree with Director Denstadt, I can tell you that if winning a battle requires showing up 50%, I'm sorry, I just botched my line. Agree or disagree with Director Denstadt, I can tell you that if 50% of winning any battle is just showing up, she's winning. I have enjoyed getting to know her the last 2 years and sharing with her as we celebrate our member agency accomplishments, employees, and project milestones. I also have appreciated the perspectives she brings on issues and her willingness to step up when called upon. just as she did recently, where she lent of her expertise as we were adopting a new 360 review process for our senior executives. Of all our member agencies, I think I've had the most opportunity to meet your board as well as Eastern Municipal Water Districts. Also, because of my long friendship with Director Gracie Torres and our common interest in workforce development, all of this has been a source of great insight for me as I've tried to be a chair for all the member agencies at Metropolitan. You have hosted me for discussions as well as shared perspectives of your member agencies. I have enjoyed the collegiality with all members of your board. Your General Manager, Craig Miller, is, in my book, a continuation of the great GMs that I had an opportunity to work with from Western that came before him, who I also got to know, like John Rossi and Don Harriger. Craig brings intelligence and passion to his participation in Camp for Water and other deliberations at MWD, and we're always grateful for all the time that he's been devoting to us. So thank you, Mr. Miller. Since I was just with you about 3 weeks ago, I'll spare you my usual remarks. You've already heard all my lines. Instead, I want to run some concepts and ideas by you to continue some of the great discussions we've already had. And in fact, I understand that Mr. Miller was on a MODOC panel this morning on Camp for Water, so hopefully this will feed to that as well. The first is our current debate about member agency equity. It comes up a lot. Moving forward, as we adopt a climate change, does equity mean the same measure of benefits in dollar terms for each of our member agencies? And if so, by what metric? This is the current framework whereby one member agency may say that they contribute to a greater share of Metropolitan's revenue, and because they purchase more imported water or pay more in taxes, that they should therefore be entitled to a greater share of something, say, like governance. In the 30 years I have been involved in water, the City of Los Angeles has made that argument, the San Diego County Water Authority has made that argument, and more recently, Eastern Municipal Water District has made that argument. And they've used it as a premise to argue for more prominent status in one form or another. In fact, I have used it myself. And I'll argue that San Fernando doesn't purchase imported water most of the time, but our property owners pay their property taxes, and we subsidize the imported water that others use. So one may argue both the levels of tax and volumetric contributions to MWD's revenue base about how we think about equity. However, is there another way to establish how the Metropolitan family stays together for the next 100 years? What about equity and perception of Metropolitan's value proposition? Right now, it starts with customers who complain that retail rates are too high, and then go to the supermarket and buy bottled water that costs them $1,000 more. $1,000, 1,000% more, sorry. I was trying to make my point, I'm too eager. Could it be that residents are actually saying, and our member agencies by extension, that it's not only that our rates are too high, but that we're not worth it? Could it be that the act of supplying you with imported water from 200 and 500 miles away is not worth it to some member agencies because they are suffering from declining water sales overall, and they have water from their own local projects to sell as well? The question then becomes, what is our value proposition, and how does that translate among our different member agencies and the rest of the water supply chain? I ask these questions because we must reframe our business model to account for lost sales we all face, along with the burden of offering our customers a high level of reliability that goes all the way to the tap. With a high percentage of our region's water traveling hundreds of miles to get to local taps, we must also ask how much we are willing to risk the sudden or declining state of our delivery systems. Without continuing investments in the imported water system, it wouldn't take too long for many parts of Southern California to face what the greater metropolitan area around Mexico City is currently facing, which is intermittent water service that operates only during certain times of day. A lot can go wrong in 200 to 500 miles. As MWD Board Chair, this visit comes at a time when Metropolitan and our member agencies also continue to face enormous pressure to reduce our reliance on imported supplies, beginning with the Colorado River. And our demands on those sources are declining in meaningful ways. On the Colorado, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation expects us to produce almost real-time results. And we are delivering on those demands to the tune of 1.7 million acre-feet over the past several years, which, because of conservation and the great programs that you and our member agencies have implemented, and the restraint in water use by our member agencies, remains at Lake Mead to this day. But as I already shared, the conservation reflects steeply declining water sales, consumption, and revenue. Metropolitan's board has taken initial steps to address this paradox through the newly adopted budget, and you've acted on some of the results of that budget today. In August, we will be increasing the ad valorem tax while keeping volumetric rate increases to the single digits on average. We realize that there are perceived inequities to resolve from the current business model, such as the treatment surcharge. That's why we are accelerating the planning process for a new business model that is part of the Climate Adaptation Master Planning process known as Camp for Water. I want to end my opening statement with this. Of all the problems that we could be having, especially as compared to other parts of the country and the world, as I just mentioned, I mean, we had Atlanta last week in a state of emergency. Our problems are not bad problems to have. It demonstrates that the last 25-year planning horizon that saw real integrated resources planning with an emphasis on local projects and conservation has worked, and that we can use this time to resolve the resulting ironies that I described today. Many of you know Deborah Mann, the former COO at Metropolitan, and she's my former colleague. When planning conservation programs in the early 2000s, she would often challenge me to quantify the return on investment from conservation. It has taken me 24 years to answer her question outside of the abstract, but here it is. The return on investment in conservation and local projects is 2.1 million acre-feet of water that's currently in storage out of 3.4 million acre-feet in total in various reservoir and groundwater storage accounts, and it's worth approximately $3 billion. That's not bad. It's a great return on the $1 billion we have invested together in conservation and local projects throughout the last 2 decades. Our struggle is to visualize the future on how we will tackle the greater uncertainty we face from nature. The only certainty is more uncertainty. Farmers have known this for thousands of years, and where they have failed, civilizations have failed. Our burden is to adapt to uncertainty at a greater scale than anyone in history has attempted to address. Ours is a region the size of the entire state of Israel, with 19 million people and an economy worth close to $2 trillion. Our challenge is to visualize for ourselves and the people who depend on us what the water future looks like. In the current age, we don't have the benefit of a Hoover Dam as an organizing principle to embody the challenge of our time. When Hoover Dam was built, the big goal was to drive growth. Today, the challenge includes growth in some areas like yours, and literal survival during droughts in others. We saw that in 2022 with the State Water Project exclusive areas. So I end with the question of what will it be? What's the value proposition from Metropolitan that can work for everyone? Now I'd like to turn this over to our General Manager, Adel Haj Khalil, who's going to talk about some things that are a little closer to the ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chair Ortega, and good morning, and great to be with you. President Gardner, thank you for hosting us, and thanks to the board members. And Craig, thank you for your partnership and leadership. And to Director Denstad, thank you for being there and your support on leadership at Metropolitan's board. I think we are going through a transformation at Metropolitan. What worked for us over the last 100 years is going to be different for the next 100 years. The chair talked about what is that Hoover Dam change that we have to do. It may not be a Hoover Dam. It may be a combination of things that we have to do. But we all know we have a responsibility to ensure safe, reliable water, and I will add affordable water for all with no one left behind. That's critical, with no one left behind. And that's really what we're trying to do. MET should be the umbrella that brings everybody. The benefit of a co-op like Metropolitan is to bring people together and to leverage the resources and not have each agency do their own resiliency on their own, because I'll assert to you, the cost of doing it alone is too costly. But leveraging and the economy of scale can benefit all of us. And that collaboration can help us move forward. And that's really where we are heading into right now is what's the future? We saw what happened in 2020, 21, and 22. We almost ran out of water for a majority of our communities on the west side of this region. But also at the same time, the Colorado River was almost hitting to a dead pool crisis where the Bureau of Reclamation came out and said we need to cut 4 million acre feet. And if you recall, we were at Metropolitan talking about potentially coming with a major allocation for the entire service area. Nature threw us a lifeline. We had some rain, but doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. What we need to do right now is take advantage of this time to plan for the future. What is the future going to look like? And that's why we are doing the Climate Adaptation Master Plan. The Climate Adaptation Master Plan is actually coming together and developing the plan for the future. What's the blueprint? What kind of investments we have to make to provide us the resiliency as we face this climate change? We know that we're going to see 3 years, 4 years of a drought, hotter and drier conditions. The governor himself in his Water Action Plan said that we'll lose 10% of our water supply by 2040. And we need to figure out how we make up that. That's made up through conservation, which is a way of life, we know that, but also through storage, conveyance, recycling, reuse, all the things that we are looking at doing. And that has to be, we're not going to do everything, but we need to create it's a risk management approach. The bottom line is, how much are we willing to invest to protect us? It's like buying an insurance policy. How much are you willing to invest? We can't be 100% sure. But the question is going to be, what are the options at the table? And that's what we're developing right now as part of this Climate Adaptation Master Plan. And the chair talked about it. At the end of the day, that's going to be driven of how much can we afford and how much are willing to pay. That's why the accompanying work that's happening with it is the business plan. The formula that we used for many, many years, assuming that we're going to grow and growth will pay for this, is not going to work anymore. There is a benefit. Whether you buy water from Metropolitan or not, there's a benefit for the infrastructure of Metropolitan that's investing in. Everybody benefits from it. And that's really what we're looking at. If we can work together on building this, what I call the resiliency portfolio, the resiliency infrastructure, everybody should share in this. And then if you buy water, then let's figure out what is the process to charge for the water you're using. It may be a different discussion. There's nothing preconceived about it. But what we want to do is ensure fairness. We need to ensure that conservation is being rewarded. Also, a big formula is because of our Metropolitan as a co-op, we have areas that are growing, like yours, and in Eastern and Western and Riverside and San Bernardino. And there's areas that are not growing. And we're seeing supplies that maybe are available higher than demands in some areas in the region. And there's areas that you have more demand than supply. We can't create new supply in every place. But if we are able to work in collaboration, we can move supply to meet the overall benefit. And that's the word that we use, exchange. We're going to be talking about a lot of exchange, how we can move water around the system for the benefit of all. And that's the discussion we're having as part of this business model discussion. And I think it's going to benefit all of us. And we know that we need to invest in infrastructure. That's why we're building the Paris Valley extension out of the Marsh Air Force Base to serve this community. It's 2/3 complete. The second tunneling job, I know Director Denstad was out there and Craig, and we're very proud of the work we're doing. And the third leg of the tunnel is being done. And by this time next year, it'll be fully operational and providing water to your communities here. That's the infrastructure we have to build. Some of the infrastructure is getting old. and we need to renew it. I was with the staff yesterday over at Skinner treatment plant, not far from here. I was down by Diamond Valley Lake, and we are talking about some of the equipment that have to be replaced. And we need to do a lot of work to make sure the system is still serving us. Plus also looking for ways to find a new local water supply. We're also looking at ways that we are looking at how we can create reliable imported water. So we're working with the Delta, with the Department of Water Resources and the partners in the Delta. And next Monday, the director of the Department of Water Resources will be here with her team on the Delta Conveyance Project to present the cost-benefit analysis and how it looks at it. What we have not done in the Metropolitan have not decided on the investments yet. We need to look at all of those and decide what's best for us, what's most reliable for all of us. And we need to continue working through it. But I'll give it, the chair was able to actually put a lot of discussion at the table, especially with bringing the folks up in the Delta down here to understand what we have done. We invested over $1 billion in conservation here. That saved us the water that we're talking about. 3.4 million acre feet of storage we have, record, equivalent to 3 years of water that we'll have to import if it wasn't for that storage. 1.7 million acre feet in Lake Mead. But also, we're invested in south of the Delta storage. Last year in October, we invested $200 million in a project in Lancaster. It's called the High Desert Storage, where we invested in building underground storage of 300,000 acre feet. What's 300,000 acre feet? It's equivalent to Lake Castaic. And now we can put 70,000 acre feet in and out that we can connect directly into our state water project. That's resiliency. As I heard, I think, the director, when you talked about flying a plane while replacing the engines, it's exactly what we're doing. We're flying and planning for the future as we're replacing, and we cannot stop still and say we can't do anything until we finish. We have to continue working through these things, and we cannot just stop, and that's what we're doing. We continue doing the rehab. When we had the drought in 2021-22, we took action. The board took a resolution, August 2022, to take action. We immediately did a lot of work to repipe the system, to use the pipes in different directions, to ensure that areas like Inland Empire and other places are now served from Diamond Valley Lake, from the Colorado River. And we are actually building right now a project down on the west side from Venice all the way to the west side of the region. It's called the Sepulveda Feeder, to actually build pumps so we can pump water up the system to serve our communities. We're also planning for a largest recycled water project in the nation, Pure Water Southern California. Is that going to be built fully? The answer is probably not, but we're going to go through a process with the board. We're going to go through a process with the climate adaptation. It may be phased, because part of the discussion during the climate adaptation is we've developed a blueprint. Some projects will be done for sure. Some projects will be phased over time. Some projects will be implemented if triggered, because that's smart management, that's smart planning. Put the plan together and let's define the triggers that have to be done. We will bring into the board a phased approach for Pure Water Southern California. But also, we're knocking on every door, trying to get money. We've been successful. Last year, we were able to get $220 million in grants from the state. This year, we just got last week $100 million from the federal government for Pure Water Southern California. And we are in negotiations right now with the Bureau of Reclamation under the Inflation Reduction Act for $420 million in grants. $200 million is the first tranche and $220 in next tranche. Part of it is actually having some money for underserved communities. We actually, for the first time in that discussion, put on the table a requirement that 40% of the funding will go directly to underserved communities. We're pushing that with the Bureau of Reclamation. We're pushing that as part of our negotiations. Last week, I was in D.C. I testified before the Senate Budget Committee at the request of Senator Padilla, and we talked about drought, dollars, and resiliency. And we talked about what we need to do. We asserted the need for federal help. That cannot stop. And I know there is a lot of concern about it. But one thing that we're doing is Senator Padilla, through our advocacy, is advocating for a low-income assistance program for water. that's moving forward, and hopefully that will get moved forward and get that in place because it helps our communities address their issues so we can actually apply the charges that's needed. Plus, also, we're extending the large recycled water program funding beyond 2026. That's something that's on the table, and we're looking at how we can continue that investment in what we're doing. Also, last week, we actually convened a group of leaders across the state, whether it's the labor, environmental justice, business community, and water agencies to come together to advocate for a climate resiliency bond. There's discussion in Sacramento about a climate resiliency bond, and we advocated that 2/3 of that bond should come to water. And I know Greg has been involved through CMUA and others about it, and through Aqua. I think it's critical that we were able to bring that coalition to show our leaders, both in the House and the Senate, and the Assembly and the Senate, that we are strongly coming together. We may not get all what we're asking for, but I think if that's going to be at the ballot, let's make sure it serves us and serves our communities. That's a very important element. There's a lot of discussion also at the state level for a low-income assistance program. It's still in the early stages of regulations, but we're working through that effort. So it's going to take a lot of us working together. And I really opened the dialogue. I know the chair has encouraged the general managers to engage with us. And at the part of the Climate Adaptation Task Force, the general managers are sitting at the table with board members. But I already have expanded the involvement of the general managers as my partners. At the 26 general managers, we have not only the member agency managers meeting, which is open to a lot of people. I have my own closed meeting with them to discuss issues before it becomes a policy debate, to get their direction, to get their input, because I think, to me, our job is to serve the entire region and to collaborate. We actually took a trip to the Colorado River and build bonding between all of us and all the general managers, because it's all about us working together. And I think the relationship between everyone has been great because we all bring different perspectives, but the collective makes us better. Individually, I think we're one drop, but collectively, we're an ocean. That's really how I see it, and I think how the chair sees our relationship and how we work together. To me, it is important that we continue negotiating on the Colorado River. As you know, we've been heavily involved. I'm leaving this meeting to the airport to go to Denver for a meeting on the Colorado River, meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation and some of the partners, upper states and lower states. We are, as California is now united, Lower Basin, Arizona, Nevada, and us are united, but we still are looking for post-2026 guidelines. They'll expire at the end of 2026. What they're going to look like in terms of the guidelines and how we're going to use the water. We have agreed between now and 2026 to do some cuts, and we were able to use some of the funding from the Bureau of Reclamation. We're actually trying to monetize some of the water we have in Lake Mead to meet some of the requirements on putting water in Lake Mead and have that money come back to help us financially. So in the budget, $60 million was put in place to help us monetize some of the water, so we're working through it. Through also the Inflation Reduction Act, we were able to bring $47 million a year that we used to pay our farmers in Palo Verde Irrigation District to fallow land. Now that has been paid by the federal government over the next 3 years. That's another way of doing it. But through our advocacy too, the St. Louis Reservoir on the State Water Project area, initially it was going to be paid 50% by the federal government, 50% by us contractors. Through our advocacy, we were able to change that back to the fair 85, 15%, and 85% is paid by the federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation. That saved Metropolitan and us as a collective $245 million that we had to pay otherwise if it was not paid. So to me, it's going to take all of us continuing to work together to plan for the future. We're going to develop a plan that we all agree, and we need to ensure that everyone is taken care of. This cannot be on the backs of the few that are buying water. Yeah. There is a benefit to resiliency, whether you buy water or not. And that's the discussion we're having. And that's a commitment that I made to ensure that there's open dialogue across the board. And that's important. Conservation, for the first time, we're actually going to be selling water that we saved and actually exchanging that water to bring revenue to pay for conservation. That's great, great formula and great success. We have increased our rebate for turf replacement to $3 a square foot. And now we have trees as part of the rebate. You can actually, as a resident, you can get 5 trees at $100 a tree, and that can help with the canopy and can help with the water storage. New ideas are happening. A lot of innovation is happening. We have an Office of Innovation. We have an Office of Grants that we're going to focus a lot on how we can reach out and get more funding from the state, from the federal government, and how we do it. And the advocacy for us is the benefit, and what we do in Southern California should not be carried by the Southern California residents. It benefits the entire state. So the entire state has to share in this. And now we're expanding it to saying the entire Southwest. And in our negotiations with the upper basin states, we're saying is we could not just say to us and the lower basin, cut, cut, cut. We've invested a lot of money. So what we're saying is, how can we share in the investments? All of us have to reduce our use, but maybe we need to augment water supply. That's why Arizona and Nevada is interested in sharing in our project in Pure Water Southern California and willing to put some money. Why not Utah? Why not Colorado? Investing in money that can go into projects that can do desalting, or projects can do recycled water, or some projects that can do conveyance improvements. That can help us all, but we need to look at making not only reservoirs of water, but also reservoirs of money that we can invest and talk about augmentation. There's a different discussion, different than what we had in the past, because we have a limited amount of water. But also we're building relationships. Relationships are critical. We have actually reached out, and the chair have hosted the Colorado River Indian Tribes for the first time in a board meeting. We had a meeting with them twice already, and we are actually working with them on ways that we can help them farm more efficiently. So they're going to partner with us and learn from our farming practices. They're going to have their workforce come and work with us and find ways that they can have their workforce invest and be there with us. But the big one is they have rights, water rights, that we can find ways that we can monetize that and help us shore that and bring it into our system that can become reliable. It can benefit the tribe, but also benefits all of us. We're knocking on every door. We're working together as on behalf of Metropolitan and everyone. And we need to ensure that affordability is at the table. That's an important element. We need to make sure fairness and equity. So the chair talked about the issue with the treatment surcharge. It's an inequity that has been raised, and I've committed to making sure, and I think the board have committed also to making sure that it gets addressed immediately. We're not waiting. We actually had a meeting last week with the staff and the general managers to talk about how we can resolve it. It was looked at in 2017, nothing happened to it, but our commitment is making sure it's fair and equitable, and let's put everything on the table, and nothing is left out. And I think we've had some healthy debates, sometimes disagreements, but we have healthy debates at Metropolitan. Everything is at the table, and I think the general managers have had a voice and continue to have a voice in this effort, because to me, this is not a one-way street. It's everybody being served, and who knows your issues more than your general managers and your board members. So I want to say I'm very excited about the future. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you, Greg, for your leadership. Thank you, Director Denstad, for continuing to hold our feet to the fire, always to make sure that we are responsive, but also to the representatives here at the board. I know each one of you represent your community, and you are really a voice for the things that we have to do. And I'll tell you, it's going to be exciting times. We are at a transformational moment in our history. I know we are changing. I mean, Metropolitan is going to be 100 years old, not 2028. And I think if we're able to set the future plan for the next 100 years, we're all going to be beneficial, because at the end of the day, when you turn a faucet, people need to make sure they have water. And that's an important element, with no one left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have public comment at this point?
Yes, we do. Are you ready to call?
Yes, please.
At this time, I'd like to call Darcy Burke.
So for the chair and the general manager, we I wanted to agendize this so we could take public comment from some of our local agencies, but I know our board does have questions too after they're done.
Okay. Thank you, President Gardner and board members, for the opportunity to speak and for inviting Chairman Ortega and General Manager Khalil today. From the beginning, Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District has been very active in Metropolitan's CAMP process. We see it as an opportunity, one that sets our region's directions and priorities for the next 50 years. Last week, as part of the subcommittee on long-term regional planning processes and business modeling, there was a coalition requesting two things: establish a comprehensive, transparent understanding of the current business model, prioritize clear understanding of deficiencies and challenges Metropolitan's business model is expected to face in the future. From EVMWD's perspective, these requests are irrelevant. First, a business model tells you how an organization works. Unlike a business plan, which is not the same thing, it consists of only 4 elements. Value proposition, which personally I have been waiting for Metropolitan to define since 2005. Key resources needed to deliver on that value proposition, rate formulas, and key processes, how decisions are made, key performance indicators, and metrics of success. There is not one document that I'm aware of that exists that provides a comprehensive explanation of how Metropolitan works, and for those of us that have been around for some time, we know that. Although business models are impacted by external factors, they do not include an external market assessment such as a PESTEL, and therefore are unable to address future issues or changing market conditions. Rather, business models identify the process in which they will be addressed. So in Metropolitan's case, moving forward, that will be CAMP, a decision-making matrix that will with the weight items already determined. What that is today, quite frankly, depends on who you know. There are only 2 reasons why you change your business model. The first is your price or rate model no longer results in financial viability. I think we can all agree that after the last budget process at Metropolitan, we are in that boat. The second is the resources and processes no longer deliver the value proposition to your customers. Since that is yet to be defined, I can't say that it's determined that we can or can't. That's debatable. In addition, during the discussion last week, some member agencies shared that economics alone should be the deciding factor on future projects. Although CAMP has already determined the decision-making matrix, let me remind you that Flint, Michigan made its water resource decisions solely on price. I think we all agree that cost of cheap water can be extremely high. As the co-chair of the U.S. EPA Local Government Advisory Committee's Climate Adaptation Communication Work Group, I understand what climate adaptation planning means. At our work group, we recommend that when there is a subject that is not something we can all agree upon, to get buy-in, it is important to identify the co-benefits. In looking at the CAMP process, there are many, many co-benefits, including, at last, something I have waited 20 years for, a well-defined value proposition. EVMWD looks forward to continuing the CAMP process and exploring potential business models that meet the needs.
Thank you, Director Burke, for your comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment, Tammy?
Not at this time.
Okay, let me bring it back to the board. Another reason that we agendized this the way we did is so that we can have some interactive discussion between the board and the Metropolitan representatives. So, if I may, I'd like to start and pick up a little bit from what Director Burke mentioned about the business model. We agree that it's important that Met look at its business model. Personally, I think one of the things that needs to play a role in there is to shift your revenue stream from variable revenue based on sales to fixed revenue. You took an important step in that in this last rate making. But I think it's important that we define what the business model is today before we go try to fix it. And I haven't seen that. I don't know. I think it's important for Met to share that with its board members so they can discuss it and then decide, okay, this part needs to be changed in that way. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but.
Yes, thank you, President Gardner. We agree. But we also believe that it has to be informed by the supply chain. And I think the participation of the general managers is aimed in that direction. I think my opening comments had everything to do with that because at the end of the day, we have a struggle between the past and the future. We know how we defined equity in the past, and it wasn't always smooth. I mean, there were lawsuits that evolved out of the feeling of inequity. Having that is hindsight. I think we need to come up with a true understanding of what the value proposition is that brings everybody together. When I mentioned Hoover Dam, that's kind of obvious. Out of Hoover Dam, the whole development of the West ensued. It was the reason we're going after federal grants, for example, and state money isn't as an act of charity. When we talk about the fixed source of revenue, it's the ad valorem. That's almost a sacred funding source that goes towards things that provide a general benefit for everybody. And so when I've been talking about the Endless River and all this other stuff, it's a modest attempt at trying to come up with a way that we can visualize for ourselves and for the supply chain what that organizing principle is. The days of Hoover Dam being that organizing principle are well established, and we're living off that legacy. But given the investments that we have to make in our reliability into the future and our adaptability, what is that, right? And how do we justify to the ratepayers and the taxpayers that we're going to take another step on the ad valorem in order to fund something that is for the benefit of the region? And so I want to thank Western. I think, there was great compromise that went into that ad valorem. Some people wanted more. And the feeling, I think, by the board in the end is that if we had gone for the full amount and there had been some conflict resulting from it, that we wouldn't get a second bite at the apple. I think we have an opportunity now, and we have an opportunity to rally everybody together around a organizing principle that articulates the value proposition of Metropolitan for the next 100 years.
Great. Thank you.
Just to add on the existing business model, we will clarify it, but just to tell you exactly what I saw, the business model that was a challenge. 18% of our revenue comes from fixed, which is the ad valorem. And that's really tied to the State Water Project. We pay about $700 million into the State Water Project. Whether we get water or not, $700 million we pay. Out of the ad valorem that pays for that State Water Project, $168 million is collected through the ad valorem to pay for it. So we're subsidizing the State Water Project by, $620 million? And the issue that we have is as we are reducing our water use, which is great, our water use last year was 1.2 million acre feet. And what's happening is there is still a huge cost for the upkeep of the system. There's a huge cost for repairing and rehabbing the pipelines, replacing the pumps that serves the entire region. The concern that we have and we saw happening is the entire cost of Metropolitan's upkeep of the infrastructure, not only the expansion, but the upkeep of the infrastructure is on the back of people buying water. To me, that's a broken model. It's a broken model. It does not work. And so what we are saying is, let's put that on the table. The option could be do nothing, accept it, or find a new way. And I'm just saying to folks is let's not try to predetermine what the outcome is, because I don't know what the outcome will be. The only thing we need to do is put it on the table to say, how can we deal with it in a fair, equitable way? How can we address this? And to me, immediately we saw that happening for the last 2 years. And for the first time, the board has made a decision to force the issue by projecting less sales to ensure that we are not having a place that we are chasing ourselves. They actually made a huge commitment to reducing our projections for sales, which is great news. But the issue you have is you're still going to pay for the upkeep of the system, and the next one is going to be the expansion of the system to create resiliency. Adding the two together, it cannot be on the backs of few people buying water. And we're saying is a benefit to everyone. But how can we do it in a fair way that nobody is left behind? Can we look at exchanges? Can we look at ways that people can monetize if they're not using water, that they can exchange it with somebody else? I think there's a lot of creative ideas, and everybody's looking at us because I think we have a chance to put something forth that can be a model for everyone across the nation.
I just want to add something. We do hear you, though, and I think it's incumbent on Metropolitan to come up with some straw figures, we can call them straw men, some straw figures, straw people, that will spark ideas that people could then consider. And then one other thing, President Gardner, you're being invited to sit with us at a Metropolitan Board meeting, just as the general managers did over the last year, because we do want to draw you into that discussion as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. One other question, and Mr. Haj Khalil, you talked about the Met family and how we should be working together to help each other. And there are things where one part of the family benefits but another doesn't. And hopefully the next one, it's the other way around. But in working on the Camp for Water program, a couple of really major players are not very active. And they're the ones that are well built out, San Diego and LA. How do we, as the rest of the Met family, bring those big players and big voting blocks into the process and get their perspective and their input during the process instead of when it comes to the end?
So I'll also say something. I'll also ask the chair. The first thing is they're engaged. The chair of the task force is a board member from LA, Matt Peterson. The chair of the finance committee is Tim Smith, who's San Diego, and who oversees that portfolio. During the budget discussion, it took a lot of work, and I think we worked really hard to make sure everybody's engaged. Everybody's engaged, and I think what's happening is people are trying to predetermine the outcome instead of saying, come in with an open mind and allow the process to happen. And we're pressing that. And I know the chair and I have been pressing everyone to be at the table, engaged fully. And my job is to ensure that also the general manager is actually getting the feedback and the input into the process outside the task force. Task force is great, but I want to also be checking with them to ensure that their voices are heard. So it's important. And also we need to put some stuff behind us, and that's some of the issues some people will position themselves because there is outstanding litigation, that if we don't free ourselves from the stuff that's pulling us down, we can't be free to be at the table.
Yeah, President Gardner, it concerns me that that's a perception that is out there. The reality of the last 2 years since I've been chair is that I have appointed, is our general manager just reflected, key players from Los Angeles and San Diego to key positions driving Camp for Water. In fact, the vice chair in charge of the overall portfolio is Gail Goldberg, who's a renowned planner for both Los Angeles and San Diego, and she's at every meeting. So where the perception is coming from that they're not engaged is a curious factor for me. Because I think that there's a conventional way of thinking about the relationship between the member agencies that is embedded in the conflicts that engulf the agencies over rates right up until about 4 years ago, when the last set of rates, 2 rate cycles ago, was the final litigation from the San Diego County Water Authority against Metropolitan for those rates. We've gone through 3 rate cycles already, and there's been no litigation. But yet the reaction that you get from people is that we're still where we were 6 years ago. So in order to move forward, the board next week will consider re-engaging in settlement discussions with the County Water Authority. And I'm going to set up an ad hoc committee because the reality of it is that, it's a process that goes back to 6 years, and I'll tell you where I'm going. So leading up to this moment, I've been trying to balance the interest of I used to call them co-litigants, but I call them litigants now. Because there's 8 agencies that were the principal players in that litigation. And that included the San Diego County Water Authority and then 7 co-litigants. There's 19 agencies that do not have that standing. I'll tell you how it works. When you go into a closed session, board members are admonished that you're supposed to keep the discussions in the closed session confidential unless the board authorizes you to speak to your member agency. For the litigant agencies, they can talk to their boards. So one of the issues that I think that we need to really assure everybody about in the Metropolitan family is that everybody, to the degree that we can on our board, will exercise their fiduciary duty in Metropolitan's interest. So that means that those member agencies that are not members of the litigation force that's out there, that's driven this litigation, are going to need to be treated in a way that includes them, so that at least the MWD board members that are on the board are understanding what the litigant agencies are being told during the discussions. I know it all sounds complicated. I'm not a lawyer, so I wish I had simpler language. But I think fairness is going to be a key component of whether we can. And the reason it's important is because that litigation had to do with rates. If we don't settle that litigation, it's not going to matter what we do in terms of a business model, because we're going to be facing potential litigation on whatever we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Denstedt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I know it's a way out of your ways. We're out here, and we appreciate you taking the time to spend that portion of your day with us. And I really appreciate a lot of your comments that you said in talking with about the ad valorem discussions that we had. Everything that we do or want to do it's about our financial stability with the organization and what the family's going to do. And I was certainly happy to be part of those budget discussions on behalf of Western, my board, the concerns that we had here, and I brought to those discussions. I was pleased that we took the positive step to increase the ad valorem for our financial health in the future and what that is looking like. So, moving down that path, where does that leave us? Because we're not out of the woods yet. We still don't have the fixed cost, we have, and we don't have enough revenue to generate that, and there's still a funding gap. So what do you foresee as our future in our vision of moving forward to balance that out a little bit better for our fixed costs versus our variable revenues and not be so volatile in the future? Just a little question.
Well, no, I think it's the fundamental question of Metropolitan, because, for example, a lot of what the general manager described as potential straw programs that we could do, like an exchange program, it depends on stabilizing Metropolitan's revenue. If you cannot stabilize Metropolitan's revenue, then any exchanges that happen within our system that does include a Metropolitan charge is a path to the abyss. So I think the vision has to involve what Metropolitan's role is going to be and what the value of that role is and how much the member agencies are willing to pay for it and through what means. And in the past, for example, on exchanges, we facilitated exchanges for entities that were not member agencies, like Irvine Ranch. They have an effective exchange program with Metropolitan. I think the lawyers might object to me calling it an exchange program, but in reality, it functions kind of like one. And yet, because of the fear of loss of sales, Metropolitan has never done something similar to its member agencies. So it comes down to finding a way for our member agencies to be able to generate revenue and for Metropolitan to be able to generate revenue to cover its cost. And if we can do that, then I think we can figure out what Metropolitan's role is going to be in the import of water, and not so much on the import of water. I think I mean, it's our backbone. We're going to have to maintain that system. It's everything else that came with it. Like, do you want the local projects program? And if we're going to have a local projects program, how are we going to pay for it? And who's going to contribute towards that fund? And furthermore, how do we articulate the value for those that are not getting water directly from that source? It's the general benefit principle. When I was at Western Central Basin 30 years ago, we built this recycled water project. Everybody was really happy about it, and everybody bought into the idea that by us taking this recycled water, we were offsetting demands on imported water that was available to everybody else. Guess what? That doesn't sell anymore. That doesn't sell anymore. You go to a member agent, we're having the debate right now about pure water. It's kind of like, I'm not going to get a benefit. The former director from Las Virgenes would make that argument. Well, if I'm not going to get that water directly, then like, why should we pay into it? Well, what happened to the general benefit principle? It doesn't work. And as Ms. Burke said, you know, that was the value proposition, and that value proposition ain't selling. So what is the value proposition that's going to sell? And maybe it's embedded in this idea that we can protect each other from overproduction by allowing you, say for example, you get to the point where you've built enough resiliency with local projects and you have more water than you need, that we can make that a cheaper alternative to other member agencies and manage it through an exchange program. Maybe that brings back the general benefit principle. I don't know. I think it takes smart people that are on the ground to determine that, and that's where we're looking to the likes of Craig Miller and his member agency colleagues to help us to define that. So I hope that answered part of your question.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, you know, water sales, there's a component, right? We've had a good year, and we've got a lot of water in storage. It's a huge value in what we're going to do, a component of the budget that was passed to look at additional sales of that surplus water that we have available. You know, one of the things that we gave the general manager here a task with in April of 2023 is we gave him $20 million to go out and find water and go and buy it. So, you know, you talk about exchange agreements, you talk about transfers, you talk about those things, you know, what are going to be the plans moving forward to benefit the member agencies to be priority users of that availability, should they have the funds to be able to bring that in, and how are you going to manage that?
Go ahead, you deserve a bite at the apple.
No, I think to me what's happening is, just talk about groundwater basins, right? And to me, for a long time, we forced member agencies to buy water from us and to put it into the groundwater basins. We are actually opening the discussion about, can Metropolitan put water in the groundwater basins through a member agency partnership that we can benefit the entire region as a whole. So we're putting it not for the benefit of one, but rather the benefit of the all. In the same way is the investments in local water supplies. For a long time, everybody's saying, let me build my own local water supply, you give me my rebate. Why not partner and now build this infrastructure for the benefit of the collective? And you can get your share if you want, but Metropolitan is actually building it for the benefit of the region to create this additional water supply for everyone. We're partnering also with folks like in the Central Valley and San Joaquin Valley to utilize the groundwater basins to store water when we have ample water. That's a cheap water that we can put in the ground as long as we have agreements that we can pull it out and bring it into the system. And what's also missing is the conveyance to move the water around. That's another key element for the ability to move water around and get that exchange and the movement is a flexible, what do you call the infrastructure of the future, or new class of infrastructure that we need, is that moving water around is different than what we've had in the past. And I think that's a change that we have to look at, because that gives us the flexibility and resiliency.
Yeah, to me, it goes back to the original answer I gave you, which is it depends on stabilizing Metropolitan's revenue. Mm-hmm. If we can cover our cost of the state water project with a greater portion of fixed revenue, I think that liberates our ability to maybe replace the local projects program with something closer to what you're talking about, where we reap the benefits of the past investments that have rendered so much capacity for savings in the system. I mean, this idea, if you wanted to play it all out, I'm not a member agency manager, but if I were, I might be asking, what's my share of that 2.1 million acre feet? Because I already paid for it. And if you look at it from that lens, you would say, and I'm from an agency that pays property taxes more than rates, and I would say, well, we pay the State Water Project. All that water's come in. It wasn't used. It's already stored. It's already paid for. Maybe there's some cost of keeping it in a reservoir, but shouldn't I be able to get a credit for that somehow? Shouldn't we be able to apply that somehow as something that was generated by the member agencies? Well, I think we can, and that would be a true market. It's wet water that we're talking about. It's not paper water. So I think stabilizing Metropolitan's revenue, especially when it comes to the State Water Project, is going to be key. I'll tell you the other area it works, Sites Reservoir. The first third of Sites Reservoir is environmental water. Our water would be parked on the bottom of that reservoir. Now think about it. We have a 2.1 million acre foot entitlement on the State Water Project. We've realized on average only 800,000 acre feet of deliveries. If we go buy water and park it at Sites Reservoir, it threatens only to increase or to reduce our yield from the State Water Project, because we're parking more water on top of our entitlement that we might not be able to get through. So to a large degree, that project makes a lot of sense as a state-funded, federal-funded project that improves conditions in the Delta, because if you can improve the conditions in the Delta, we can get a greater percentage of that 2.1 million acre foot on our contract. So I think, that's the way. Now, if member agencies want to invest in Sites Reservoir and roll the dice on whether they're going to get their water out of there or not, they can do it, right, with the free conscience. So I think those are the kind of things that are liberated if we can gain a greater portion of our state water contract obligation through a fixed charge.
Thank you.
I have a question. As far as I'm concerned, you answered a lot of what I was wondering. But so knowing that Metropolitan Water District has invested already put money towards big water supply projects on the horizon, Delta Conveyance, Sites Reservoir, like you spoke of, and Pure Water, for example. What is the prioritization mechanism that Metropolitan is going to use for these projects? And then piggybacking off of what the general manager spoke on, of maybe phasing some of these projects, how are we going to fill the workforce? You and I have spoken about this in length, but how are we going to fill the workforce to get these done in the next whatever projection that is, when we're seeing a decline in our workforce?
That's an excellent question. So if you look at the traditional form of equity, every member agency would come forward and say, build my project. If you build my project or subsidize my project, I'm good. That's equity because I'm getting mine, right? Under the current framework where the general benefit principle doesn't work anymore, that's what's in play. But the corollary to that is that if you build everything at the same time, it's synonymous to putting all your eggs in one basket. So where's the climate adaptation portion of it? So the way I envision it in trying to illustrate an answer to your question is as a 100-year runway where you have projects that are lined up like airplanes, and they each have a specific function, right? So let's say water recycling were an airplane. There's different ways of deploying recycled water. You have, as the general manager talked about, excess recycled water and some desal water down in San Diego County. Those projects that produce that water are already entitled. They're paid for better or worse. People say, well, they paid too much. Well, so what? They're built. when the general manager talks about phasing pure water, what you would do is the first airplanes to take off are those. And the way they take off is through an exchange program, right? So now you're not building more capital, you're using the capital that was already built in order to move that recycled water through the system through an exchange program. Now, 20, 30 years from now, we may find out that all the water is being used that our member agencies have produced. And then at that point, you would say, okay, let's build this leg of pure water. So in the main San Gabriel Basin, for example, they want pure water because they need water to replenish their basin. Why wouldn't they be able to get that water through an exchange in the interim until conditions warrant building that infrastructure? So I think it's the same for everything that we're doing. I mean, if we're going to look at another airplane called desalination, well, guess what? There's already one project, maybe another project in the wings. You know, those projects evolve over decades, and we line them up. That's the simplest way that I could illustrate. The other issue, I think, is, I talked about it last Friday at the WINS conference, is workforce development. There's a report about a year and a half ago that, that we're in a crunch for skilled professionals like engineers and lab technicians and others, and that we're not training enough people in the United States, you know, to take those positions. And when you talk to executives at many of the major engineering firms, they're recruiting those professionals from universities abroad. So even if we wanted to, say, tomorrow, start building Delta Conveyance and Pure Water and everything at the same time, chances are the market couldn't sustain all the engineers that we need in order to build those projects. So, you know, we've got a little time and we have an opportunity to plan, but in a broad brush, I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you for being here, too.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Western Water is grateful that our general manager, Greg, has been, was invited to sit on the Camphor Water Task Force and appreciates how much it has evolved to make it more effective process as we continue to move forward and tackle difficult challenges. What can Western Water do to help achieve the goals for the task force?
I think bringing new ideas, being able to open and listen and bring the perspectives of your agency, because your agency is one that has some challenges just because you have the underserved community portion, you have also the increase in the growth with added water supply. There is an interest in ensuring reliable water supply for the communities that are growing. So I think to me is bringing that perspective to the table and allowing the interaction and working together with the other general managers outside the process to build those coalitions and relationships. It's going to take all of us to agree on how we move forward. It's not going to be one fits all. It's going to be different things that we're trying to address. And I would not just assert, and I've been saying it, it is no preconceived idea. I think a lot of people are afraid what the outcome is. And I don't think, let's not get there yet. Let's work through the process. To me, there is a need to have that interaction because we know what we need to do if we don't do it. And to me, there is an evaluative criteria that we developed as part of the Camphor Water process. We're going to evaluate these projects. And what we need to do, when I led efforts on integrated planning, One Water, there is at the end, when you do a roadmap, there is projects, what's called GO projects, GO policies. There is projects that go if triggered, that are not ready yet, but they will be ready if triggered. They're defined and ready to go. We're not going to invest in something purely. So we need to have that discussion, but building relationships with other partners. And I know Greg has done a great job, and I know he really, today he was speaking at, the discussion over at Orange County and other places, building relationships with folks in San Diego and other places. To me, it's all of us continuing the dialogue to understand the perspectives so we can open the dialogue and not be caught into our own silo. And I think that's really going to be very helpful to ensure that's being done.
And My answer is, we're back at the beginning. I thought that what Craig did today, this morning with MODOC, was really great. And when you look at the foundation of Metropolitan, it wasn't Metropolitan that invented Metropolitan. It was the member agencies. The city of LA went and talked to all these other mayors and county supervisors and said, hey, we need something in common. We need conveyance, right? We need a Colorado River aqueduct. And they got together and they hired William Mulholland and a few other engineers, engaged Caltech, and they went and surveyed the Colorado River aqueduct. And that's why we're here today. And to a large degree, when I see our general managers talking to each other, especially if they're talking to each other across what used to be the comfortable conversation, which are the caucuses. I know that Dan Denham, for example, the new general manager at the San Diego County Water Authority, is reaching out to other member agency managers. I know they're getting along. They're having great discussions. They're not always agreeing on everything, but I think that through that process, so give your general manager the time. I also urge you as directors to reach out to your counterparts in those other districts. When you go to conferences, you know, make time to go meet with the County Water Authority people. I know Director Denstadt does that every month in between our meetings and overnight as we all stay for the next day. And I think those things are creating a great deal of goodwill and will benefit us on everything that we've talked about today. Like, how do we come to a business model, and how do we come with a common value proposition for Metropolitan?
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, thank you so much for being here. This is, to be able to be right in front of you and have face-to-face conversations is great. I had written a note. I believe I heard the general manager mention that DWR is going to be presenting on the Delta next week.
Monday.
Is that anything that's on Zoom or
Yeah.
on the web that can be watched by others?
Yes, it's on Zoom. It's broadcasted and
I would
available.
love to get that.
Yeah, it's in the afternoon as part of the One Water Committee.
Okay.
I believe it's either 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I can't remember the
Awesome.
time.
Hopefully I
It's,
have
yeah, it's
space.
in the afternoon. Yeah, the One Water Committee. Yeah.
I'll
Thank
send that
you.
information out to the board.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I also really loved Chair's comment about, and I don't know if this is exactly how you said it, but this is how I took it. What is going to be our Hoover Dam moment? And that kind of, just that visual. You're right, the visions that they had back when the LA Aqueduct was made and when Hoover Dam was built. And I mean, you look at those, they're amazing wonders. And what they've done for humanity really is incredible. So I liked that, and it made me think at all of this discussion about your planning, which I'm going to circle back to that in just a second. You're taking your next 100 years, it seems like, from what I'm hearing, and you're looking at how you're going to do this metamorphosis in a way. You're still a water agency. Your main goal is there, but times have changed and processes have changed and scientific information has changed. And this is probably going to sound a little sad, but I thought of the company Kodak when digital cameras came in. Now, I think they're still around in some way, shape, or form, but not like they were. And they didn't necessarily adjust. You know, all the little photomat stores closed and the developing closed, and, you know, the cameras all changed. So I love that you are all taking this serious look at what is Metropolitan going to look like in the next 100 years. And I'm sure some of it'll be the traditional, you know, you're supplying imported water. We need it. You know, we've got to figure out maybe how to get more of it from time to time. But those are just a couple thoughts that I had while you were speaking. The other one, and this is going to show my very immature aptitude of water.
why can't we just enlarge the state water project? It seems like, we widen freeways, we do that kind of thing, and it seems like, God, it's already there, it's already got a path. Is there an easy answer as to why we can't do that?
So on Kodak, by the way, the person that came up with the digital technology of digital pictures was actually from Kodak employee. I don't know if you know that.
No,
Before,
I didn't.
and that was proposed through their innovation, and it was sidelined, and that's probably, they're probably regretting all that stuff. And that's why we need to make sure we listen to everyone.
Yeah.
The other thing is the State Water Project is a lot of issues and things in it. One is the environmental regulations and what needs to be done. That's why we signed on to the voluntary agreements to create a balance between the environment and the use and create this agreement so we can guarantee some water moving forward. One of the biggest issues that we're dealing with right now is some of the settlement of the State Water Project, the pipes below. The issues that we're dealing with is the infrastructure that's carrying the water have settled and limited its capacity. So there's a lot of things at the table, and that's why in our discussion, it's one, we need to fix that to allow for more conveyance, but also, where do you put the water when you have the wet conditions? Because you're not gonna have the snowpack, you're not gonna have the things that we had before. So the discussion and the agreements we've done with the San Joaquin Valley storage and the project we did in Lancaster for storage, how can we move water when we have it and store it, instead of trying to fight over it when we don't have it? So there is an effort for us to fix the St. Louis Reservoir repair and raising the reservoir. That's another discussion. A lot of work being done, but the end of the day is how can we create resiliency around the Delta? The biggest concern we have is flood potential of a flood that damages the Delta. There is a lot of discussion about sea level rise that can cause damage to that. And a lot of things that are at the table that you'll hear in the discussion on Monday. But for us, we need to see how we can adapt to this and how we can manage it. But a lot of work is happening on the infrastructure itself and how we pay for it to fix it and ensure that the conveyance continues to be working.
If I may add to that, I think that one of the dangers that we're running right now is not how to expand the State Water Project, but right now we're being rolled back. We have a 40% allocation. We should be storing water. Yeah. What's happened is that in the Banks pump station, there's a very elaborate diversion, fish diversion apparatus that they've included, and they've been able to save a record amount of fish. But somebody did a study and said, well, if you're catching that many fish, how many fish got grounded up by the pumps? So they made calculations. And based on those calculations, they're telling us that we got to slow down our pumping. So in the past, Metropolitan would need 70% of an allocation to be able to store water off the State Water Project. Today, we just need 30. And the state announced a 40% allocation. And we're not storing water because we got to study how many fish may have been grounded in the pumps. Now, the fish that they caught, the record number of fish that are being captured, they're counted physically. There's a person there that goes by the tank. They actually take the fish and they put them in these tanks, and then they drive them to safety. And they've caught so many of them that now we got to do the math on how many more may have been caught. So the issues in the Delta are mind-boggling to me. Last year, for example, we started engaging the Delta County supervisors. We had 5 supervisors for 3 days come from San Diego through Compton, and they got to see everything that's in our system. We have regular discussions with them, and we talk about seismic risk. Metropolitan has a freshwater emergency pathway in the event that there's a disaster. They don't believe that it's in danger of a seismic problem. We're talking past each other. There was a study that was released about 3 weeks ago that the atmospheric rivers that we've seen in recent years are nothing compared to previous atmospheric rivers, some of which have been at least 10 times more impactful than what we saw. But if you talk to the people in the Delta counties, they'll say, well, it's probability, right? Like, so it's a probability, there's no such thing as zero risk. Well, we're seeing the world very differently. And I think one of the fears that I have about the Delta Conveyance Project is that it could do a lot of good, in stabilizing our deliveries. But I believe that, say 5 years, say we build it out, and there's one of these atmospheric rivers that come down. The same people in the Delta are the ones that are going to be saying, you built it wrong. Right now, according to our engineers, there's about a ½ inch of capacity if the currently designed Delta Conveyance were to get constructed. Anything like that happens, they're going to say, you miscalculated. You should have built 2 tunnels or something else. It's not hard to envision that. That's just the way it happens, right? And so to me, I'd still look at that 100-year runway, and I think that as the process moves forward and gets delayed, we have an opportunity to envision and account for the things that might happen that could allow us to get more flexibility in the State Water Project. So I'm sorry for going on so long. But.
No, that's okay. I just had one more, more of a comment, but also kind of a question. So we are literally 20 days away from the hearing in Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife for SB 366. Mm-hmm. And it was mentioned earlier today, what is the plan for the future? And I think you're probably referencing your climate adaptation plan, which I'm sure has good foresight and components in it. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but SB 366 is a planning bill. And I hope that from north to south, that folks will look at that and get behind it, because it will be, just like you're trying to plan for Metropolitan for the next 100 years, it basically could plan for our water needs in California for the next 100 years. And right now, my opinion anyway, from what I've learned about it, is that it's not really a controversial plan. It doesn't name any specific projects. It sets up the blueprint for setting that goal of 10 million acre feet, I think it is, by 2040, and then whatever the goal is will be for 2050. So I feel like it could be a tool used for all these other, for individual water agencies, for big metropolitan water agency. So I would love to hear how Metropolitan might be supporting that.
So we've been working very closely. We had a meeting yesterday, staff, with Craig and others. The concern we have is the amendments that were made on the floor at committees. And some of the amendments actually go beyond, that can expose some things, including opening the Delta Conveyance, the Delta Reform Act, and having some things in it that can really tie our hands in the future. And we are trying to make sure that whatever is the intent of that bill does not have an unintended consequence that will tie our hands. And I know we've been very open with Craig and others about it. Our staff has a direction to make sure that we get this supported and move it forward. However, there's some things that got added to it that gives our team and others some concerns, and we've raised those concerns. I know we've resolved some of them yesterday. I think we're moving through it. I'm confident we'll be able to get through that in the next 2 weeks. But I think, to me, is expanding it to issues regarding the Delta Reform Act and putting the Department of Water Resources in the middle of this, that will bring some other folks in. It's going to open the door for things that may not be intended for this. And that's, I don't want to get into too much detail into it, but we're open, we're working very hard. My staff is working really hard on get it. And their direction is to support this, but let's make sure it doesn't have unintended consequences. And those things happen not by the author and the proposed bill, is actually what got added to it during the process.
Okay.
So I'm going to speak
you.
as an individual director. I agree that there needs to be a plan. The state passes too many mandates and puts too many obligations on water agencies without there being an adequate plan for how those will be implemented. I think one of the major failures of the water industry is that we're not owning those least able in the state. Our biggest cost driver in California isn't all this infrastructure we've talked about today. It's treatment. And there's a whole universe of small water systems that get left behind because the state will promulgate a new regulation and will not put a plan on it. So I had a side conversation with Senator Caballero last week because her district is being hit hard by the new standard for hexavalent chromium. They're under incredible pressure to consolidate all these little water systems at their edges. The cost for compliance with that standard is already prohibitive for them. They're a severely disadvantaged community in both Watsonville and in Salinas, and there's no plan. Coachella Valley Water District. Everybody celebrated about a month ago, a grant, 2 months ago, a grant of $100 million that the SAFER program gave to Coachella in order to help some of the small water systems in their area. Well, guess how much compliance with hexavalent chromium is going to cost? $500 million just for Coachella. And this is after the estimate in the plan said that it wouldn't cost more than $200 million to implement the regulation statewide. So one of the things that I would have liked to have seen in the bill is a greater ownership of those kinds of issues so that we're taking as a water industry responsibility for our own in the water and getting the moral high ground. I had a meeting with the head of Restore the Delta. I don't know if I've told this story here before. And I was admonished. I was told that that I should say something to the state water contractors and to the Southern California Water Coalition because they're talking about disadvantaged communities, and that it's an insult to the Delta because somehow they have a corner on underserved communities. I said to her, I think you're talking to me here only because I'm the chair of the board, but I represent the smallest and the poorest member of Metropolitan. And if you think that for a minute I'm going to tell our advocates not to advocate for us, you've got another thing coming. And so I think we need to gain the moral high ground with our small systems. And I know you and Eastern have been leaders in helping the disadvantaged communities in your service areas. And I think you ought to take those values statewide as part of the bill.
Thank you. With that, I want to thank you and all of the Met people who came to join us today.
Craig has.
Craig still has.
Oh, yes.
Craig has some questions.
Mr.
but
Miller.
Mr. President, if I might be able to interrupt for just a second, I want to apologize. I need to leave. I have a plane to catch, and I'm sorry, but this got scheduled like way after I bought these plane tickets, and so I really have to extend a sincere apology to everyone, but I need to catch a plane. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate that. I know Craig has got a couple of items and things he wants to ask on the questions. And just as an update really quickly, just as a reminder, General Assembly is coming for June 20th. You guys are all voting members at General Assembly for the stuff that needs to be passed at General Assembly, so I hope you're there. Mr. Chair, we've extended an invitation to you. It is our largest attended event so far in its history. We have nearly 1,000 people that will be attending General Assembly down in Pechanga on June 20th. So looking forward to that. And as my last leaving and parting note for today, I just want to say Happy Father's Day for all of you fathers out there. I know it's a big, significant thing, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful Father's Day, and I look forward to seeing you, Mr. Chair. I will be in attendance on Committee Day and Board Day. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, we didn't intend this to be an endurance battle for you. Yeah, I think just to kind of close it up, I do really appreciate you being here and making the effort to come out and talk to us and our member agencies. And these are hard conversations, but I really appreciate the leadership of having these conversations because, you know, that's 100 years old. It's ridiculous to think that we should operate the same way we operated at the start, and we have evolved so much, and, you know, we've really opened the door to how do we continue to evolve and provide the greatest service we can for Southern California, and we're right there with you. You know, as you said, the conversations sometimes are hard, but we're such a supporter of Metropolitan at Western, and we really value and need Metropolitan to be successful. And so, you know, we're huge supporters. Maybe selfishly, building on Director Roten's comments about SB 366 is, you know, I really do want to see the support. And why? You know, it's a planning bill, but what it really is it's changing the discussion on water on a statewide level. We have spent so many years battling water supply in this environment of scarcity where we're going to argue about which water comes out of Sites Reservoir first. Is it for the environment, is it not? Or is it for urban use or ag use or whatever? And we've just degraded the entire statewide water system. And so I really appreciate your leadership in trying to change those conversations, bring people to the table. SB 366 is exactly that. It is, we got to stop arguing about in-delta flows as part of the bill and argue about how do we create abundant water for all sectors of the water environment. And, you know, here we go again, reverting to our old bad habits of we're going to argue, rather than plan things, we're going to argue about unintended consequences. And, you know, I just really appreciate that you continue to be out there on the federal level and the state level saying things are changing, we have to rethink, and we have to do the right thing for California. And it's not easy, it's hard. And so I appreciate the risk that you both take to be out there advocating for what you provide for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and I think 366 is, as you know, we've been having my staff is charged to do it. I think we have a plan, and it's exactly what you said. It's not specifically, I think we can talk about the benefit to all versus tying it to a specific Delta Reform Act issues that can tie our hands, and I don't want to create another issue that can tie our hands. But with that, I think the staff is working through it. I think we can get this done, and we are working hard on ensuring this is supported and moving forward. So,
great. If I may just conclude, Craig, thank you. I hope you'll back us up because I think one of the things that at least I've tried to do is to call it out. So, for example, last year the governor said that he was going to provide a 9-month moratorium in the trailer bill discussions for large infrastructure. And at the time, Delta Conveyance was not excluded. And yet, it was taken out during the discussions. And it was my disappointment, and I expressed it to our general manager, that we weren't there to support the governor. Now, some have said that, well, maybe the governor was posturing. Well, I don't know, but if we weren't there, how can we say that, right? So I think that we are being rolled back. I think that to some of the opponents of Delta Conveyance, they've given it up for dead because of the legal challenges and the permit challenges that are sure to come. But I think one of the things that we can't be shy about is that so long as the issues of Delta Conveyance remain unresolved, it's very difficult for us to plan with our money, I'm not talking about the state's money, how much to invest in the Delta. And that's what the debate about our Delta Islands is about and all of that. So that's the spirit and the context, and let's not give away the store. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming, spending time with us. We have just a couple of things to wrap up. I want to do it really quickly if we can.
Thank you.
Mr. General Manager, have you a report that needs to be made?
I have just a couple really quick things. Grant update, we did receive another $100,000 grant that we haven't reported to the board, so I want to let you know we just did that. You've already highlighted most of my SB 366 update for you. I did want to show you this. You all have a copy of this. So this was a study that was done by UC Davis, UC Merced, and UCLA, supporting what SB 366 and California Water for All is saying, is that we are losing water supply. It backs up what the governor said in losing water supply because of climate adaptation. And so here's a third-party analysis of that too. So I want you, hopefully you'll read that. And then in closing, we are going to celebrate next Friday our recent graduate from Leadership Riverside. So Sarah, congratulations on, hopefully you still graduate. Hold it together for one more week. That's all I have today.
Okay, Mr. Bellinger, you had nothing, I believe?
Just very briefly, one item. Directors Rizvi and Roten met with me about a week and a half ago with regard to the investigation to the Director Torres FPPC issue. We're gathering information so that we can continue that investigation.
Okay, thank you. For directors' reports, unless there's something really important with your agency, let's skip them for now. SWAMPA did routine things. We've heard quite a bit about Met today. Chino Basin Water Master did some routine things, as did CDA. Anything for any of the others?
Tomorrow for them.
Yes. So everybody's adopting budgets. It's that time of year. With that, do we have any individual directors' comments?
I just had real quick, save the date. The Riverside County Women's Leadership Conference is August 8th. This is the 13th year for that conference, and it's held at Crossroads Church over in Corona. We can get you the specifics for that, but I just want you to be able to get it on your calendar.
You are all registered.
Oh, good. Are there? I'm sorry.
I just had it also Happy Father's Day to everyone, every father or father figure. But our next meeting is on Juneteenth. We're still meeting on Juneteenth? Okay, just wondering.
Any requests for future agenda items? If not, we do not have a closed session, so we will be adjourned.
If we could, can we get a real quick photo opportunity, please?
Sure.
Thank you. If the board would like to join down in front, that'd be
yeah, we
great.
lost a key player, unfortunately, but.
We Photoshop her in, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a cutout.
Recording stopped.